The Shafia family fled war and instability, hoping to build a new life in Canada. They were originally from Afghanistan, a country where traditions dictate fate, family honor outweighs personal freedom. On the surface, they appeared to be an ordinary immigrant family, a father who had achieved financial success, 2 wives, and 7 children. However, behind this image of prosperity lay a harsh reality. Control, fear, and strict discipline became inseparable parts of their lives until one day, the family found itself at the center of one of the most shocking and tragic crimes in the country's history. Muhammad Shafia was born into a poor Afghan family. His father passed away when he was just 2 years old, leaving his mother to care for the household alone. From a young age, he understood that survival required resilience. Education was a luxury beyond his reach, so he started working early. At first, he helped his mother with household chores and then moved on to repairing appliances. Eventually, he realized that there were other ways to make money by buying and reselling goods for a profit. Muhammad's business quickly expanded. He dealt in electronics, furniture, and automobiles, constantly finding new ways to grow his wealth. Lacking formal education, he relied on his instincts and sharp business sense to seize every opportunity. As his financial situation improved, he felt ready to start a family. Rona came from a respected and wealthy background where her family valued traditions and ensured their daughters received an education. Although she was raised in a loving environment, her future was largely predetermined. Like many young women in her social circle, she was expected to marry whoever her parents chose for her. When her parents announced that she would marry Muhammad Shafia, she felt she had no choice but to accept their decision as her duty. The wedding took place at one of Kabul's finest hotels, featuring hundreds of guests. To outsiders, it appeared as a prestigious union between 2 noble families, yet no one considered Rona's true feelings. After the wedding, her life changed significantly. She was now expected to obey her husband, manage the household, and meet all his expectations. Years went by without any children, which caused Rona's status within the family to become unstable. In Afghan society, a woman's value is often associated with her ability to bear children. Muhammad's frustration grew, and rumors about Rona's inability to conceive began to circulate among relatives. Over time, his irritation turned into cold indifference, creating a widening gap between them. After 7 years of marriage without children, Muhammad decided to take a second wife. The second wedding took place in 1988, and many of the wedding photos show Shafia standing next to his 2 wives. The 3 lived together in one household. Tuba Yehia was younger and more obedient than Rona. Her primary value was her ability to bear children. Once she married Muhammad, she quickly gave birth to their first son, followed by another child. As time went on, Tuba's influence in the household increased, while Rona faded into the background. Muhammad enforced strict rules that everyone had to follow without question. Disobedience was met with humiliation or physical punishment. He controlled all financial matters and made decisions for the entire family, demanding total respect. The women in his home were confined to the boundaries he set. Tuba not only accepted these rules but also actively upheld them. She fully embraced her role as the main wife, completely overshadowing Rona. Tuba managed the children, the family finances, and even dictated Rona's circumstances. Over time, her treatment of Rona grew more severe. She isolated Rona, limiting her interaction with the children and restricting her personal freedoms. Hamed Shafia, the oldest son, was raised to enforce control over his sisters. He was taught to believe it was his responsibility to ensure they followed the family's rules and to report any disobedience. Zainab, Sahar, and Geethi, the sisters, lived under constant scrutiny. Any attempt to resist their father or Hamed led to punishment. They were not allowed to make friends, freely leave the house, or choose their own clothing. Muhammad viewed them not as individuals with their own dreams but as extensions of the family, expected to uphold his concept of honor. When the family relocated to Canada, many believed this would offer the children a better life. However, the family dynamics remained unchanged. If anything, the control within the household became even stricter. Muhammad recognized that his children were now in a society where women had rights, so he tightened his authority. The daughters started to notice that life beyond their home was very different from what they had always experienced. They observed their classmates engaging freely, choosing their outfits, and making decisions about their futures. Meanwhile, life at home stayed the same. Hamed took on a stricter role. He watched over his sisters to prevent them from adopting Western habits, monitored their phones, scrutinized their behavior at school, and reported everything back to their parents. Rona had hoped that moving to a new country would improve her situation, but her reality remained the same. She didn't speak the language, had no legal status, and was unemployed. Without a passport or financial independence, she was completely under her family's control. Canada did not provide the Shafia family with freedom. Instead, it became a new place where their old rules still governed their lives. Zainab, the eldest daughter of Muhammad Shafia, was the first in her family to openly rebel against their strict control. She secretly started dating Omar Wahid, a young man of Pakistani descent who was older and would never be approved by her father. Their relationship began with passing notes, progressed to email exchanges, and eventually led to secret meetings. Zainab understood the risks involved. She was constantly watched by Hamed at home and felt unsafe even at school. However, her love for Omar drove her to take these risks. When her father went on a business trip, she saw a chance to invite Omar over, thinking they wouldn't be caught. Hamed soon noticed a pair of unfamiliar shoes in the hallway, quickly realizing someone was in the house. He immediately reported it to their parents. Although Omar managed to escape, Zainab faced severe repercussions. She was physically punished and confined to her room for several months, barred from going outside. During her isolation, Sahar attempted to carve out her independence in a different manner. Instead of openly rebelling, she subtly distanced herself from her family's traditional expectations. At school, she took off her headscarf, wore makeup, and dressed in ways her family prohibited. She also grew close to Ricardo Sanchez, a young man from Honduras who was very different from the type of husband her parents would want for her. Sahar yearned for freedom and carefully planned her escape. She and Ricardo talked about moving to another country where her family couldn't find her. Her plan was to make it look like she had gone to Honduras, while in reality, she intended to cross into the United States. However, her plans took an unexpected turn one evening. While dining at a cafe with Ricardo, she spotted her brother watching her from another table. He didn't approach or say anything, but his presence made it clear she was in serious danger. Upon returning home, she braced for the worst, realizing her father already knew everything. There were no discussions, only punishment. After facing physical aggression, she was prohibited from attending school. Sahar came to understand that escaping would be much harder than she had thought, as it might put her life at risk. In the midst of this chaos, Geethi, the youngest sister, instead of trying to run away or seeking a secret relationship, she acted out at school. Her aggressive behavior, frequent absences, and open defiance of teachers became her form of resistance. She wanted others to recognize that something was seriously wrong at home. She was called to the principal's office, and this led to a meeting with social services. She told school staff and a youth welfare worker that she wanted to be removed from her family home. However, when her parents were invited to discuss the situation, they argued that Geethi's behavior stemmed from negative Western influences. They assured the social workers that they would take care of the issue themselves. The daughters' efforts to defy the strict family rules only worsened their situation. Their father and brother felt they had lost control over them, leading to the need for punishment. The conflict between the sisters and their family had escalated beyond repair. When Zainab, Sahar, and Geethi attempted to escape their family's control, they understood the risks, but they were shocked to find that the system meant to protect them was ineffective against their father's and brother's authority. Zainab was the first to seek help. After months of being confined at home, she understood that her only chance for survival was to leave for good. She escaped and found shelter in a facility for women in crisis. For the first time, she felt safe. However, her absence was quickly noticed. Hamed, her brother, contacted the police, claiming she had been kidnapped and accusing her friend Omar, hoping to get him arrested. When the police found Zainab, she explained the truth: she had left to escape her family. The police did not force her to return home, but they also failed to provide her with proper protection. After witnessing what happened to her sister, Sahar sought her own way out. Although she was too scared to go directly to the police, she contacted Child Protective Services. She described the harsh restrictions, constant threats, and her fear for her life. The caseworkers listened, but ultimately decided that intervention wasn't necessary since she was nearing 18. They offered her temporary shelter, but that meant she would have to return home once her stay ended. Sahar realized that going back would lead to punishment far worse than what she had already faced. Frightened, she declined their offer. At that moment, she understood that the system could not protect her. Rona was the only one who fully grasped the serious danger the sisters faced, but she felt powerless to intervene. She lived in constant fear herself. She realized that Muhammad and Tuba no longer viewed their daughters as obedient family members, but rather as threats to the family's honor. Rona understood that trying to step in would be pointless. Within the Shafia household, it was evident that the daughters had stopped adhering to the rules set for them. They had rejected the traditional lifestyle. Their actions were not only seen as rebellious but also as a significant threat to the family's reputation. Muhammad could not let rumors about his rebellious daughters circulate among their acquaintances. In Afghan culture, such stories spread rapidly, putting the family's respect at risk. What frustrated him the most was that their defiance was happening in Canada, a place where he had less control over his daughters' lives than he did in Afghanistan. The greatest concern for the family, however, was Zainab. She hadn't just disobeyed, she had run away. This was unacceptable to them. She was living independently, making her own decisions, and no longer following her father's authority. To them, this was the ultimate act of betrayal. Tuba realized that she couldn't force Zainab to return, so she found a way to have her come back willingly. She called Zainab, convincing her that their father had changed his mind. Tuba told Zainab that he had given his blessing for her to marry Ammar, allowing them to be together officially. On May 18th, they held a religious wedding ceremony at an Islamic center. The next day, Zainab had her hair done and decorated her hands with henna. Her uncle took her to a restaurant, and on the way, he tried one last time to persuade her to think twice about the marriage, but Zainab remained resolute. However, her sense of freedom was short-lived. None of Ammar's family members attended the ceremony, as they disapproved of the marriage. Tuba was devastated, overwhelmed with embarrassment, and she collapsed from humiliation. People poured water on her to help her regain consciousness. Seeing her mother in distress, Zainab ran into her arms and said, "If you're opposed to this marriage, I'll leave him." Zainab asked for a divorce, and Ammar agreed, saying, "He can't bring shame to his family." The cleric declared them divorced right then and there in the restaurant. They had only been married for 24 hours. After the annulment, Zainab's relationship with Ammar deteriorated sharply. Pressured by her family, she had to cut off all communication with him. Her life became increasingly restricted. Her family monitored her movements and controlled her interactions. Although Ammar attempted to reach out, her relatives made it impossible for them to stay in contact. Eventually, their relationship ended entirely, adding more stress and emotional pain to Zainab's life. She realized she would never experience true freedom and lost all hope for independence. Following this situation, the tension between Zainab and her family intensified, leading to tragic consequences. This marked a turning point from which there was no return. After considering the situation for some time, their father realized that his daughters would not change their behavior or abide by the family's rules. Muhammad felt that he could not wait any longer. He believed that betrayal was unforgivable, and that women who damaged the family's honor needed to be held accountable. He thought he had been too forgiving in the past, and if they did not take action quickly, their family's reputation would be at risk. Therefore, he decided that his daughters would no longer be allowed to live. The only task remaining was to figure out how to execute this plan. Muhammad wanted to keep a low profile because he understood that a crime like this needed careful planning to appear accidental. Thus, the planning commenced. They began preparations weeks ahead of time. Muhammad, Tuba, and Hamd outlined the steps to carry out their plan. One important aspect was acquiring a second vehicle, a Nissan Sentra. Officially, it was bought for convenience, but in truth, it was essential for their scheme. It was reported that the Shafia family purchased a used Nissan Sentra for $5,000 Canadian dollars the day before the family left Montreal for Niagara Falls. This would create the illusion of a family trying to reconnect after previous conflicts. The vacation would suggest that everything was fine and that they were making efforts to improve their relationships. Zainab, Sahar, Geethi, and Rona felt they had no choice but to participate, even though they had reservations. Disputing their father's decision seemed futile. From the start of the trip, they sensed something was off, but none of them could foresee that this journey would be their last. For several days, everything unfolded as planned. The family visited attractions, took photographs, and chatted with strangers, all carefully arranged to ensure that no one would suspect any underlying tension among them. In the early hours of June 30, 2009, two cars, a Nissan Sentra and a Lexus RX, left the Kingston East Motel and headed toward the Kingston Mills Locks. The Nissan Sentra carried Zainab, Sahar, Geethi, and Rona. It is unclear who was driving at that moment, but it was likely Zainab, as she was the oldest and had a driver's license. Following them at a short distance was Muhammad, Toba, Hamd, and the three youngest children, in the Lexus RX. They maintained a safe distance to avoid raising any suspicions. When the Nissan Sentra parked near the locks, Muhammad got out of his car and approached the Nissan. Zainab either got out of the driver's seat voluntarily or was forced to leave. Tuba then took over the driver's seat of the Nissan, remaining inside with the girls to prevent them from feeling suspicious. With their mother beside them, the girls did not sense any immediate danger. Muhammad and Hamd returned to the Lexus and drove to a nearby motel, where they intended to create the impression that the family was merely stopping for the night before resuming their trip. At the motel, they woke the manager to rent 2 rooms, but their answers about the number of guests seemed inconsistent, which raised suspicions. After dropping off the 3 youngest family members at the motel, Muhammad and Hamd got back into the Lexus and returned to the locks. As soon as Tuba spotted their headlights in the darkness, she quickly exited the Nissan and ran towards them. This was the sign that it was time to act. At that moment, the women in car unaware they were in a dangerous situation. The events that followed can only be partially reconstructed from the investigation. It is unclear whether the victims were harmed inside or outside the car. However, forensic evidence provided important details. 3 of the victims, Rona, Geethi, and Zainab, suffered head injuries, likely inflicted to render them unconscious before they were submerged. In contrast, Sahar seemed to have fought back. There were no signs of head trauma on her body, indicating she may have remained conscious longer than the others. One by one, the victims were either drowned in the water or placed inside the car after losing consciousness. Muhammad, Toba, and Hamd started to set up the scene to make it look like a tragic accident. Their plan was to push the vehicle into the water to make it seem like it had rolled in by accident. One of them started the engine, shifted the car into neutral, and got out, hoping the Nissan would roll into the canal by itself. However, things didn't go as planned. The car got stuck on the edge of the concrete ledge. The front wheels had gone over the edge, but instead of falling into the water, the vehicle stayed in place. This was a significant problem. If anyone had shown up at that moment, they would have been caught. One of them reached through the open driver's window and turned off the ignition. They realized that the Nissan wouldn't go into the water without some help. The only way to execute their plan was to use the Lexus to push the Nissan into the canal. They jumped into the Lexus, accelerated, and slammed into the back of the Nissan. The impact was powerful. The left headlight of the Lexus shattered, scattering glass at the scene. With that final push, the Nissan Sentra fell into the water, taking the 4 women with it. Thinking they had completed their crime, they started to cover their tracks. They tried to pick up the broken pieces of the Lexus's headlight but couldn't collect them all. Then, they quickly left the site and returned to the motel to create the impression that they had spent the night there and had no knowledge of the disappearance. On the morning of June 30, 2009, a worker at the Kingston Canal noticed something odd in the water. He saw the roof of a submerged car. He quickly called the authorities. Emergency responders and divers arrived to investigate. When they removed the vehicle from the water, they found the bodies of 4 women inside. None had tried to escape, there were no broken windows, and no signs of anyone attempting to open the doors. The victims were soon identified as 3 sisters and their stepmother, Rona. Zainab was in the front passenger seat, her head leaning forward, her black cardigan soaked and worn backward after hours underwater. In the back seat was her younger sister Sahar, while Geethi's lifeless body was found above the driver's seat with one arm resting on the headrest and the window next to her fully open. Rona was curled up in the middle of the back seat, none of them were wearing seat belts. The initial inspection of the car raised immediate concerns. The seat belts were unused, which was odd. During an emergency, people usually grab onto something for safety, yet there were no signs of a struggle. Meanwhile, 3 individuals walked into the Kingston police station: Muhammad Shafia, his wife Tuba, and their son Hamd. They reported that 4 women were missing, claiming that the women had taken the car keys during the night and left without permission. They suggested that the most likely reason for their disappearance was an attempted escape that went wrong. Initially, their story seemed plausible. The family mentioned that Zainab and Sahar had a history of defiance and conflicts with their parents. They reasoned that if the women tried to run away, they might have panicked, lost control of the car, and accidentally driven into the water. However, the first pieces of evidence soon raised doubts about this narrative. First, the car was found in a Kingston canal, which is not a road or highway and impossible to access by accident without knowledge of the area. Second, the condition of the bodies was concerning. If the women had been alive when the car entered the water, they would have tried to escape, yet there were no signs of struggle, no scratches on the windows or attempts to open the doors. This prompted investigators to reevaluate the family's account, and the theory of an accidental crash began to unravel. Detectives began examining statements from the motel staff where the Shafia family had stayed. They discovered that no one saw the women enter the building and surveillance cameras did not record them leaving. This raised suspicions, indicating that someone was definitely lying. While the police proceeded with their investigation thoughtfully and without jumping to conclusions, it became evident early on that this situation was not merely a tragic accident, it appeared to be a carefully orchestrated crime disguised as one. During questioning, Muhammad, Tuba, and Hamd struggled with details. At first, they claimed the women had left during the night, but when asked for the exact time, none of them could provide a clear answer. Their statements about when they supposedly left kept changing. Hamd insisted that he had been asleep and hadn't heard anything, while Tuba claimed there had been noise in the house that night. Later, she added that she had woken up and seen the women leaving, only to contradict herself by saying she didn't remember. Muhammad initially stated that he had been in a different motel room at the time, but security footage showed otherwise. Police conducted a thorough examination of the car found in the water. At the scene, they discovered fragments of broken headlights. However, these fragments did not belong to the submerged vehicle. This meant that another car had been present and could have played a role in the incident. Forensic experts took a closer look at the front of the family's Lexus SUV. The damage patterns on the vehicle matched the broken fragments found at the scene. Further analysis revealed that the Lexus had dents and impact marks consistent with a collision with another car. These findings confirmed a new theory: the victims had not simply been left in the vehicle, they had been deliberately pushed into the water. Investigators knew they needed stronger evidence, so they decided to place a listening device in the Shafia family's vehicle, hoping the suspects would incriminate themselves. A few days later, the police got exactly what they were looking for. The recordings captured conversations in which Muhammad openly expressed satisfaction with what had happened. He stated that his daughters had brought shame to the family and that honor had been restored. Tuba supported his words, saying they had done what was necessary. Hamd, meanwhile, repeatedly insisted that their actions had been justified. These recordings became key pieces of evidence. They proved that the crime had been premeditated and that the family had deliberately taken the lives of 4 women. The evidence left no room for doubt. The police were now ready to make their move. Muhammad Shafia, his wife Tuba, and their son Hamd were arrested on July 23, 2009. That day, They had no idea that law enforcement had already gathered enough proof to charge them. The family was preparing to fly to Dubai, but they were taken into custody just before departure. Muhammad never believed it coming, until the last moment. He believed that the deaths of his daughters and Rona had been successfully staged as an accident, but the investigation had stayed one step ahead. When they were read their charges, first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, they tried to remain composed, but their expressions told a different story. The trial began in January 2012 and lasted 3 months, drawing enormous public attention. Prosecutors presented undeniable evidence that the crime had been meticulously planned. The most damning evidence was the recorded conversations in the family's vehicle. In them, Muhammad proudly stated that his daughters had gotten what they deserved, while Toba and Hamd fully supported this sentiment. These recordings shattered any remaining doubts about their guilt. In addition to the recordings, physical evidence was presented. Investigators demonstrated that the family's Lexus had damage consistent with a collision involving the Nissan Sentra. Experts confirmed that the Lexus had been used to push the victim's car into the water. Witnesses were called to testify. Social workers, teachers, and friends of the sisters revealed that they had spoken about the harsh treatment they faced from their father and brother. Many knew they lived in fear, but no one could have imagined it would end in such a horrific way. During the trial, Muhammad showed no remorse. He insisted that the court had misinterpreted the situation and continued to claim that his daughters had brought shame to the family. Tuba, who initially portrayed herself as a grieving mother, later changed her strategy and began denying any involvement. Hamd attempted to present himself as a victim of his father's influence, but the recorded conversations completely dismantled his defense. After 15 hours of discussion, the jury found each defendant guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. Muhammad, Toba, and Hamd received life sentences in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. They appealed the decision, hoping for a reversal, but the court confirmed their conviction. Their actions were deemed an act of honor-based violence, a deliberate and calculated crime committed in the name of control and tradition. The family, once focused on preserving its honor, lost everything. Their names became associated with cruelty. The Shafia case is now one of the most shocking examples of such crimes in Canadian history. After the arrests of Muhammad, Toba, and Hamd, the remaining Shafia children faced a challenging situation. As they were still minors, they needed guardianship. Canadian authorities intervened, placing them under state protection and assigning social services to ensure their well-being. To safeguard them from public scrutiny and potential retaliation from extended family, their identities and locations were kept confidential. Some relatives in Afghanistan tried to intervene, demanding the children be returned to their biological family, but Canadian law protected them from such demands. The younger Shafia children were given a chance to grow up away from the harmful environment of their past. They changed their names and started new lives. However, they would always carry the tragedy of their family's crimes as a lasting reminder. Their current whereabouts are unknown, but one certainty remains: they were given the opportunity for a better life, unlike their late sisters and Rona. It was a warm summer morning in Melbourne, Australia, on Sunday, February 13, 2005. While most people were making plans for Valentine's Day, the city's attention was focused on something far more serious: a missing woman. Her face had become familiar across news broadcasts. Her name was Maria Korp, and she had been gone for 4 days. That morning, a park caretaker made his way to work at King's Domain along Dallas Brooks Drive. He normally didn't work on Sundays, but a routine inspection of the water tanks had brought him in. After wrapping up his checks, he stopped by a nearby cafe for coffee. That was when he noticed something odd: a red Mazda parked nearby. The color and make matched the car described in the media all week. Curious and increasingly uneasy, he walked over to the vehicle. The front seats were cluttered, with papers strewn everywhere and a stale bread roll left behind. The doors were locked. Nothing seemed forcibly entered, but the scene felt wrong, too quiet, too abandoned. He made the call to the police. When officers arrived, they verified what the caretaker suspected: the car was registered to Maria Korp, the woman who had vanished without a trace days earlier. Just after 1 p.m., forensic technicians began their search. From the outside, it looked like any other parked car until they opened the trunk. Inside, they found a woman, pale, injured, and completely still. It was Maria. There was no movement or signs of life. And then, suddenly, she breathed. Against all odds, Maria was still alive, but barely. She had endured what no one should, days trapped inside the scorching trunk of a car without food or water, suffering serious head injuries and with no way to call for help. By then, the heat of the Australian summer had turned the vehicle into an oven. Every second she survived in that space defied explanation. Maria was immediately taken to the hospital. Doctors determined she had suffered a traumatic brain injury, dehydration, and a dangerous lack of oxygen to her brain. She was placed in an induced coma and hooked up to life support. Her condition was critical. What led Maria Corp to that? Who wanted her gone? And could she survive long enough to tell the world what really happened? Maria's story began far from the busy streets of Melbourne, in a small, rugged village on the Portuguese island of Madeira. Born on January 14, 1955, she was one of 12 children in a devout Catholic family that lived high in the hills, surrounded by farmland and faith. Life was hard. The home had no plumbing, the toilet was outside, and the nearest hospital was hours away, likely unreachable without a car. Despite these challenges, the family was self-sufficient. They owned land, ran a productive farm, raised their children with discipline and devotion. Maria, like her siblings, worked in the fields and followed the rhythm of village life. She was gentle, quiet, never dreamed of much beyond what she knew: marriage, motherhood, and religion. Her heart had already chosen the boy next door. They were young and in love, planning a life together. Her family approved, his did not. Then tragedy struck. He was sent away for military service and never returned. He died before turning 20. The grief changed Maria. She often said she would never love anyone as deeply again. But her parents had other plans. They arranged a marriage for her with a man. At 19, Maria married a man she barely knew. They soon left Madeira in search of a better life. In 1975, they immigrated to Australia, settling in the suburbs of Melbourne. They both found work in a local factory. Maria adapted quickly. She learned English, adjusted to the culture, and found her footing in this unfamiliar land. Her husband, on the other hand, never settled. He disliked their new life and longed to return home, but Maria refused. Australia was their future. In 1978, they welcomed their daughter, Laura de Gois. They bought a modest home and lived simply. But in 1987, disaster struck again. Her husband died unexpectedly of a heart attack. He wasn't even 40. Maria, who was only 32, became a widow and a single mother overnight. With no time to mourn, she went back to work to provide for her daughter. She kept going, step by step, day after day. Somehow, she endured. Eventually, Maria found a second chance at love while working in a tire factory. There, she met Joe Corp, an Australian-born man who was 3 years younger and full of charm. He brought laughter back into her life. However, there was a significant issue: Joe was already married with children. Despite this, he was determined to win Maria over. Although she held strong religious beliefs and principles, her loneliness and hope gradually weakened her ability to resist him. Joe promised that he would leave his wife. Eventually, he did. His decision surprised his family. In front of his children, Joe told his wife that he was leaving her for another woman. While she had suspected infidelity, she never anticipated the public humiliation that followed. By 1991, Joe's marriage had officially ended, and within a few months, he married Maria. In 1994, they had a son named Damien. They lived with Maria's daughter, Laura, in a peaceful suburb of Melbourne. To the people around them, they appeared to be a happy couple. Maria's family believed she had found a sense of peace in her new relationship. They often remarked that Maria loved Joe just as much as she had loved her previous husband. They frequently traveled to Portugal, bringing gifts for Maria's relatives, such as household appliances and electronics. anything they needed, thanks to Joe's support. Some of Maria's siblings thought he was showing off, while others appreciated his generosity. In their eyes, Joe had become the favored son-in-law. Beneath the surface of their quiet home life, things were not as they appeared. Joe had a complicated past. Before Maria, he had relationships with other women. While married, he was unfaithful and even boasted to his brother about his affairs. His ex-wife later shared that he was very controlling, discouraging her from working and telling her what to wear, all while pretending to care. Joe always wanted everything to go his way. Joe was born in 1958, was one of 5 siblings in a typical Australian family. He performed well in school, enjoyed sports, but when he enlisted in the military in 1976, he struggled to adapt and left after less than a year. The tough conditions led him to skip duties to watch cricket matches or spend time with his girlfriend. In 1977, he married, and he had 2 children. Joe worked at a tire factory and eventually became a manager. On the surface, he seemed like a dedicated family man, but he had his secrets. When Maria entered his life, it wasn't just another fling, he decided to be with her for good. Together, they built a new life. Maria continued to work, take care of her children, support her family, and serve her church, while Joe became her partner and a source of strength. However, their relationship had hidden problems. At first, the issues were minor and easy to overlook, but over time, they expanded into something much more serious, leading to a shocking incident. After years of saving, they started building their dream home, a spacious 5-bedroom house featuring a home cinema, a beautiful garden, a large walk-in wardrobe, and a garage for 3 cars. It was more than Maria had ever hoped for, all made possible through years of discipline and careful budgeting. When the house was finally completed, Maria felt a deep sense of pride. To the outside world, her life seemed perfect, a loving husband, 2 children, and a big home. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, the once passionate relationship between Joe and Maria had started to fade. Joe developed new interests that Maria struggled to comprehend, particularly in their intimate life. As a result, she became more emotionally distant. Seeking solace, she found refuge in church and eventually stopped sharing a bed with him altogether. They began sleeping in separate rooms, growing further apart. While Maria sought comfort in her faith, Joe escaped into a fantasy world. He constructed a secret online identity as a construction business owner who was separated from his wife and looking for someone to pamper. His profile presented an enticing image, attracting responses from various women. Initially, their conversations were innocent, but things quickly changed. Joe began meeting women in person and having short-term relationships while lying about many parts of his life. As he spent more time online, he spent less time at home, which Maria noticed. In September 2003, she shared her concerns with her daughter, Laura, who was now an adult, expressing her suspicion that Joe was being unfaithful. Maria started to observe him more closely, and her fears were confirmed when she found intimate messages and receipts from motels. The argument that ensued was intense. Joe denied any wrongdoing and turned the blame on to Maria. He claimed she was emotionally unavailable, always praying, and frequently on the phone with her sisters. This infuriated Maria. She briefly thought about divorce but hesitated due to her religious beliefs. Instead, she decided to fight for their marriage. Determined to win Joe back, Maria made significant changes in her life. She started a diet, refreshed her wardrobe, and even agreed to join him at swinger clubs, actions that were completely out of character for her. She hoped this would rekindle their bond. However, nothing improved. Joe continued his affairs, often stayed out late, and the lies persisted. By early 2005, Maria had reached her breaking point. She threatened to leave, changed the locks, and kicked Joe out. This time, Joe took her seriously. He promised to change, said he would end his affairs, and wanted to start anew. For a brief moment, it seemed like they could reconcile. Maria even told her friends that things were looking up. But then came Wednesday, February 9th, 2005. The day started like any other. Maria and Joe woke up early to get ready for work, both of them working at different factories. Around 6:30 a.m., Maria left the house, followed shortly by Joe. Their daughter Laura was still living with them but had a later start time for her job and was still asleep when they left. Everything appeared normal until midday. The school called to inform that their son, Damien, had not been picked up. It was Maria's responsibility to pick him up every day, but no one could reach her. Confused, Joe went to collect Damien himself. He wondered if he had misunderstood or if Maria had asked him for help and he'd forgotten. However, when he returned home, Maria was still missing. As night fell, she had yet to return. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and none of her friends had seen or heard from her. The situation became even more alarming when they discovered that Maria had not shown up for work and had not called in sick. There were no messages or explanations. Maria was not the kind of person to just disappear. That evening, Joe reported Maria missing. The authorities responded immediately. By the next morning, her disappearance was all over the news. Her photo and a description of her missing red Mazda were broadcast on TV and printed in newspapers. The community anxiously hoped for updates. However, what no one realized was that a dark and troubling truth was already visible. Time was quickly running out. The breakthrough in the case occurred just 4 days after Maria disappeared. A city worker found her Mazda parked near King's Domain in Melbourne. It appeared to be an ordinary car until investigators checked the boot. Inside, they discovered Maria crumpled and motionless. She was alive but in critical condition. Doctors identified a severe head injury, but the real concern was the trauma to her neck, indicating someone had attempted to strangle her, cutting off her oxygen for long enough to cause permanent harm. Believing she was dead, the attacker had stuffed her into the boot of her own car. She endured 4 days in that sealed space without water, food, or airflow during the peak of the Australian summer. She was quickly taken to the hospital, put into an induced coma, and connected to machines. Doctors estimated she had only a 25% chance of survival due to severe oxygen deprivation, which had caused significant brain damage that might be irreversible. While the medical team worked hard to save her life, detectives were looking into a different issue: who had tried to kill Maria. They didn't need to look far for a suspect. Before she went missing, Maria had prepared for a potential crisis. She had given a close friend a bag containing printed emails, hotel receipts, and proof of her husband's cheating. "If anything happens to her," she said, "please give this to the police." The warnings didn't come without reason. Maria had been regularly visiting a psychic, and one of them warned her that she was in danger. The warning was clear: her husband might be involved. Maria took this seriously, and she wasn't alone in her concerns. Joe's brother, Gust, also had doubts early on in the search. Gust feared something terrible might have already happened to his sister-in-law. Additionally, Maria's daughter, Laura, recalled something unsettling. On the night Maria was attacked, February 9th, Laura suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and thought she heard her mother scream. When she went downstairs, she found Joe there, calm and smiling. He told her that Maria had just had a bad dream. Uncertain, Laura returned to bed. It was only later that she would start to question whether that scream was the moment her mother's life was in jeopardy. Joe had a solid alibi: he was at work all day, as confirmed by his co-workers. He picked up his son from school and showed real concern when Maria didn't return home. His timeline seemed perfect, but the police had doubts. While they believed Joe may not have directly harmed Maria, they thought he could have been involved in planning it. Soon, investigators uncovered another person of interest, a woman named Tanya Herman. Tanya Herman's story began in 1966. She was born into a traditional working-class Catholic family as one of 4 children. Her childhood was normal: she enjoyed sports, was friendly, often dreamed of love and weddings. At 21, she married in 1987, but her husband was abusive, leading to a difficult divorce. Her next relationship ended in betrayal, but it also brought her a daughter, whom she raised by herself. To support her family, Tanya held various office jobs, worked early shifts, and eventually moved to Melbourne for a fresh start. During this time, she worked as a waitress at a club, where she met Mr. Herman, a sailor. They got married and had a daughter, but unfortunately, that marriage also did not last. By 2002, Tanya was single, struggling to raise her 2 children. To earn some money, she began babysitting kids in her neighborhood. However, her babysitting job ended in scandal when several parents accused her of locking children in a room, and one child even broke their leg. These allegations forced her out of work. Her relationship with her teenage daughter worsened. At just 13 years old, her daughter chose to live with her father. As a result, Tanya became isolated and both financially and emotionally exhausted. She began spending time in online chat rooms. In late 2003, she met a man named Joe, who claimed to be a separated business owner looking for a fresh start and said he had 2 kids. However, the truth was that Joe still married and living with his wife, Maria. Their first meeting in person was in February 2004, and the connection between them was immediate. Tanya was enchanted. Joe seemed to say all the right things and consistently made time for her. He told her he was in the final stages of his divorce. She believed him. By late 2004, they had even rented a house together, just minutes from the home he shared with Maria and his children, of which Tanya was completely unaware. Joe went further by decorating their love nest with furniture similar to that of his marital home. He also enrolled Tanya's daughter in the same school as his own son, a disturbing detail that would only be revealed much later. Joe never moved in with Tanya full-time, despite various excuses. He claimed he was busy with paperwork, finalizing the custody agreement, or waiting for the right moment. However, Tanya began to notice inconsistencies in his stories, and his visits became less frequent. His fabrications, which he had mastered, started to fall apart. When Joe finally admitted that he was still married and that his life was far from what he had described, Tanya was furious. However, her anger quickly faded as her deep love for him took over. She decided to forgive him, but that forgiveness gradually transformed into obsession. Tanya started to follow Maria, observing her at the school gates and memorizing her daily routines. By the end of 2004, Joe was secretly planning to start a new life with his mistress while still living with his wife. His family knew about Tanya, and surprisingly, some even approved of the relationship. They had never liked Maria, likely because their relationship began with cheating. To them, Tanya represented a fresh start. In December of that year, Joe confided in a friend that he was in a new relationship and that his marriage was over. However, Maria remained unaware of this. She still thought they were trying to resolve their issues. What Joe didn't mention was that divorcing Maria meant he would have to divide their assets, including their home and the life they had worked so hard to build together. When police questioned Joe about Maria's disappearance, he confessed to having an affair, but his alibi was strong. In contrast, Tanya did not have an alibi. Detectives began focusing on her when they noticed that she had taken her daughter to school unusually late on the morning Maria disappeared. They brought Tanya in for questioning and searched her home. In the back of her wardrobe, they discovered a pair of sports shoes with red stains that were later confirmed to be blood matching Maria Corp's DNA. Further DNA evidence was found in the Corp family's garage, indicating that the attack likely occurred there. The investigators suspect that, as Maria approached her car, Tanya ambushed her, possibly with Joe's assistance. Once Maria was knocked unconscious, they put her in the trunk of her own car. Tanya then drove away, while Joe went to work, acting as if nothing unusual had occurred. Meanwhile, Tanya's explanation did not add up. She stated that her daughter had simply overslept, which caused her to be late. However, during questioning, detectives observed her nervousness and her frequent mention of Joe. Her tone was affectionate, almost infatuated, revealing that she was willing to do anything for him. Police suspected that both Joe and Tanya were involved in the crime, as they had motives, opportunities. The evidence against them. However, Joe denied any wrongdoing, claiming he was attempting to end the affair. Lacking direct evidence of his guilt, detectives decided to try a different approach. They contacted Tanya's brother and asked him to wear a recording device. This strategy proved successful. During a recorded conversation, Tanya confessed that Joe had no plans to leave his wife because he didn't want to risk losing his wealth. She revealed that Joe believed Maria was the only obstacle to their happiness. Joe thought he couldn't be the one to make Maria disappear without arousing suspicion. However, Tanya was willing to do it, convinced that no one would look for Maria and that their love justified the actions they were considering. Tanya and Joe were arrested on February 16, 2005. Tanya confessed right away, but Joe did not. He accused Tanya of being jealous and insisted that she acted alone. Tanya pleaded guilty to causing serious injury and, without going to trial, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 9 years. Meanwhile, Maria remained in a coma and did not regain consciousness for several months. Joe was released on bail, and on June 9, he submitted a formal request to visit his wife in the hospital. His request was approved, but unfortunately, her health was not getting better. On July 26, the doctors concluded that keeping her on life support was no longer viable and advised discontinuing it. This decision sparked significant controversy, led to protests outside the hospital. Maria's family was heartbroken, publicly disagreed with the doctor's recommendation, but the medical advice remained unchanged. On August 5, 2005, nearly 6 months after the attack, Maria Korp passed away. Her funeral took place on August 12. On that same day, Joe made 2 phone calls, one to his ex-wife and another to a journalist, where he expressed his intention to take his own life. When emergency services arrived at his home, they found Joe in the garage, standing on a stool with a noose around his neck. Upon seeing the responders, he jumped. Unfortunately, he died at the scene. Beside him were photos of Maria, sports memorabilia, and a handwritten note in which he asserted his innocence. We will never fully know if that note was the final lie or the truth. If Joe had gone to trial, it might have been difficult to prove his guilt, but justice never had the opportunity to take its course. In 2013, several years later, Tanya, who was still in prison, asked to marry another female inmate, but her request was denied. On February 14, 2014, she was paroled after serving a little over 8 years in Dame Phyllis Frost Maximum Security Prison, and her new partner was there to greet her at the prison gates. The death of Maria Korp shocked the entire nation of Australia. Maria was a woman who dedicated her life to her family, love, and faith, yet she was betrayed by the person she trusted the most. Her death was not merely a crime, it was a tragic outcome of obsession, selfishness, and deceit. One of her attackers went to prison, while the other avoided justice by committing to end his life. However, the person who truly paid the highest price was Maria. Her voice was silenced, her future taken away, and her story remains a painful reminder of one of Australia's darkest true crime cases. A question that remains forever unanswered: is Joe Korp guilty? The story of a young Italian college student named Giulia Cecchettin profoundly affected the entire country in the fall of 2023 due to its tragic and senseless nature. Giulia was known for her kindness and trust in others. She showed compassion to a young man who had strong feelings for her, fearing that if she rejected him, he might harm himself. Unfortunately, rather than hurting himself, he directed his pain toward others with devastating results. The full scope of the tragedy was later revealed through Giulia's personal journals, which documented her growing discomfort and emotional struggle. In the aftermath, the individual responsible for the tragedy tried to avoid responsibility by claiming that his actions were driven by overwhelming emotions and temporary confusion. However, the investigation consistently uncovered evidence suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Giulia Cecchettin was born on May 5, 2001, in Padua, Italy. She was the middle child in her family, with an older sister named Elena and a younger brother named Davide. Despite their different personalities, Elena being energetic and rebellious, while Giulia was quiet and obedient, the sisters were very close from an early age. Their family was middle class. Gino, Giulia's father, was an engineer at a local company. Her mother, Monica, worked in city administration. They lived in a spacious house and had several vehicles. Both parents were dedicated to their children. They working hard to provide everything they needed to become kind, responsible individuals. From a young age, Giulia was known for her kindness, empathy. She naturally connected with people, always striving to be helpful and considerate. At times, she was excessively gentle, often avoiding conflict even if it meant sacrificing her own interests. Julia had a wide circle of friends, effortlessly fit in with any group. In school, she consistently achieved top grades, had a strong interest in literature and foreign languages. However, her true passion lay in art classes, where her teachers recognized her talent and encouraged her to pursue it further. As a teenager, Julia attended an art academy while still in high school, seriously contemplating a career in the arts. However, as graduation neared, her parents urged her to opt for a more practical, stable career. Taking her father's advice, she enrolled at the University of Padua, one of Italy's leading public universities, chose to study biomedical engineering. Always one to avoid conflict, she agreed without protest and committed herself to her studies, even though she lacked genuine interest in the field. She did not envision a long-term career in biomedical engineering. While at university, Julia met a classmate named Filippo Turetta, who was also in Padua. Filippo came from a humble background and was the only child of his parents, who cared for him deeply. Julia and Filippo were in the same department. A mutual attraction quickly grew between them. Their relationship started with long conversations, emotional support, and facing challenges together. When Filippo began to struggle with his studies, Julia helped him catch up and pass his exams. Soon after, he asked her out on their first date. They officially started dating in January 2022, which was Julia's first serious relationship. Coming from a protected upbringing, she quickly became very infatuated with him. For the first 6 months, they were nearly inseparable, enjoying each other's company and appearing genuinely happy, which led their family and friends to believe in the strength of their bond. Just 2 months into their relationship, Filippo invited Julia to dinner at his home, where he referred to her as his future wife while introducing her to his parents. A few weeks later, Julia reciprocated by bringing Filippo to meet her family. Their friends were convinced that Julia and Filippo would get engaged by the time they graduated. Life took a devastating turn for Julia's family when her mother, Monica, was diagnosed with a late-stage illness, and the outlook was grim. Monica's health deteriorated quickly, and despite numerous consultations, doctors indicated there was little hope. The next 6 months felt like a waking nightmare for the Sacchetin family. During this challenging period, Filippo tried his best to provide support. He stayed close to Julia and also spent time with Monica. Julia truly valued his presence. She was thankful for his kindness and unwavering support. Nevertheless, even though Monica agreed to participate in experimental treatments, she sadly passed away in October 2022 at just 51 years old. Her death created a huge void in the family. For her husband, Gino, the grief was nearly unbearable. He felt emotionally overwhelmed. It was only through the love and support of his children that he found the strength to carry on. Although Filippo continued to be supportive, changes began occurring in Julia's feelings toward him. Even though they were still together, she started to feel distant and uncertain about their future. She began to consider ending the relationship but was unsure how to address it without causing conflict or upsetting him. She confided in only her 2 closest friends, people she had known for years and trusted. They were shocked. On the surface, Julia and Filippo appeared to be the perfect couple, with a happy, harmonious relationship. However, beneath that facade, things were unraveling. Julia didn't provide specific details but communicated that the relationship had reached a breaking point and ending it seemed inevitable. She didn't want to hurt Filippo, but she could no longer continue living a lie. The true reason behind her decision would only be revealed much later, following her passing. At that time, Julia was focused on preparing for her final thesis presentation. However, she realized that she didn't want to pursue a career in biomedical engineering. It simply didn't resonate with her. Without mentioning it to many people, she quietly applied to a prestigious international art school that specializes in comic illustration. When she finally confided in her father, she emphasized that she would complete her university degree as she had promised. She intended to graduate and obtain her qualifications as her parents expected. But after that, she wanted to pursue a second degree in something she was passionate about, becoming an illustrator. Gino listened intently and supported her decision. After the loss of his wife, he had a new outlook on life, recognized its brevity and fragility. He encouraged his daughter to follow her own path, make her own choices, and dedicate herself to what truly made her happy. Giulia's conversation with Filippo turned out to be much harder than she had expected. It took place in August 2023, after they had been together for over a year and a half. Giulia found it difficult to express herself, but Filippo seemed to handle the news maturely. He suggested they remain friends and stay in touch, recognizing the connection they had. Since they attended the same university and studied in the same department, they saw each other frequently. However, less than a week after their breakup, Filippo attempted to rekindle their relationship. He invited Giulia to one of their favorite restaurants, a place that once held special memories for them. He asked her to give their relationship another chance, reminding her of their good times together. Giulia, however, remained resolute. She did not want to repeat old mistakes. The evening ended quietly, but an unspoken tension lingered, only becoming stronger with time. Filippo's behavior took a troubling turn. He began contacting Giulia every day, initially expressing his love and pleading for them to get back together. However, this quickly shifted to manipulation and threats. He warned that he might harm himself if they didn't reconcile. Knowing Giulia's compassionate nature, he exploited her empathy, pushing her emotional buttons. Concerned for his well-being due to his unstable nature, Giulia reluctantly agreed to stay in touch. They briefly resumed seeing each other, driven more by worry than love. Giulia hoped this was only temporary and that their connection would eventually fade. However, Filippo's behavior became increasingly alarming. He flooded her with messages, some of which were distressing. In one, he ominously stated that they would either be together forever or their lives would both end. Although this was a clear threat, Giulia chose not to report it and only confided in her closest friend. This intense situation persisted for nearly 2 months. In late October 2023, Giulia realized she could no longer live in fear. She was set to present her thesis in medical engineering on November 16th, and her classes at the International School of Comics were starting in December. Her schedule was now fully packed, leaving no time for emotional drama or unhealthy attachments. Although still anxious about how Filippo would react, she decided to invite him to a quiet cafe they used to visit. She carefully chose her words to avoid any conflict, explaining that they could remain friends but nothing more. Despite her attempt to be respectful, Filippo was deeply disturbed by her decision. He took the news hard, began to call and message her frequently, but Giulia, busy with her thesis, limited him responses to brief notes. It was around this time that Filippo started secretly following her. He soon noticed she was spending time with someone new guy. Their friendship appeared warm and affectionate, suggesting they might become a couple. Filippo struggled to accept this, and a darker plan began to take shape in his mind. On Saturday, November 11th, 2023, Giulia dedicated most of her day to her graduation project. At around 5 p.m., she sent the final version to her academic advisor. Earlier that day, about an hour before, her ex-boyfriend Filippo called her, asking if she would join him to shop for shoes for their upcoming graduation ceremony. It was unusual for him to reach out, as he hadn't contacted her at all for about a week. No texts, calls, or visits. Giulia thought that he had finally accepted their breakup and moved on. Wanting to remain on good terms, she agreed to help him with the shopping. They planned for him to pick her up at 6 p.m. Giulia informed her father that she would be home before midnight and hugged him tightly as she left, unaware that it would be the last time he would see her alive. Filippo arrived at the Sacchetin house right on time. Giulia got into the passenger seat, and they drove to the shopping center in Margra. Witnesses later reported seeing them calmly browsing the stores together. They bought a pair of shoes. Chiaretta and Giulia also had dinner together at a McDonald's inside the mall at around 9:02 p.m., with Giulia paying for both meals with her credit card. They then left the building at around 10:30 p.m. At 10:43 p.m., Julia sent her final message via WhatsApp to her sister Elena, who was in Vienna at the time for college. However, at 10:45 p.m., her messages suddenly stopped, and she never replied again. Shortly after, her phone was turned off. When Julia didn't come home by midnight, her family started to worry. At first, they tried to remain calm, thinking she might have just lost track of time. However, by 1 a.m., they began to sense that something was very wrong. Julia never stayed out overnight without letting someone know. Her phone was off, and they couldn't reach Filippo. Her father and older sister went to file a missing person report while her younger brother stayed home in case Julia returned. They still held on to a small hope that her phone had died or that she had been delayed, but they believed she would have found a way to let them know she was okay. Police were doubtful about the situation. They pointed out that as an adult, Julia had the right to choose not to return home or inform anyone of her location. Only a few hours had passed since she was last seen, and according to standard procedure, search efforts for missing adults usually do not start until 24 hours after they go missing. What no one knew at that moment was that about 4 hours before her family reported her missing, an alarming incident had already occurred. This detail was initially overlooked in relation to Julia's disappearance, but it would soon become evident that it was significant. At around 11:15 p.m. on the night Julia disappeared, local police received a call from a man. While on his balcony smoking a cigarette, he witnessed something alarming. His apartment overlooked a small parking lot across the street, where he heard someone screaming for help. When he looked more closely, he saw a young woman, clearly terrified, escape from a parked car. Moments later, a man exited the same car, chased her down, and forced her back inside while appearing to hit her. He then pushed her into the back seat and quickly drove off, speeding into the night. The witness tried to remember the license plate number, but couldn't see it clearly in the dark and from a distance. He did remember that the car was a black compact vehicle, possibly a Fiat Punto. He quickly called the local authorities to report what he had witnessed, but since he didn't have many identifying details, they had little to work with. Initially, the authorities dismissed his call because they didn't see it as an immediate threat and chose not to respond. However, the man couldn't shake the feeling that what he had seen was more serious than they realized. Believing he had witnessed a crime, he decided to go to the police station in person. At the station, he met a man named Gino, who was there to report his daughter, Julia, missing. To their surprise, they discovered they lived only a few houses apart. The man's building was near the end of the street, right across from a small parking lot where the unsettling scene had occurred. The black compact car he described looked a lot like the one driven by Filippo. That same evening, Filippo had picked up his former girlfriend in his black Fiat Punto before they went to the shopping center. Investigators reached out to Filippo's parents, who were understandably anxious. They had been calling friends in hopes of hearing from their son, but unfortunately, no one could provide any helpful information to the police. Officers were quickly sent to the parking lot, which was now thought to be the location of a violent incident. To their disappointment, there were no security cameras in the area. However, security video footage from a factory in the nearby town of Faso shows Filippo brutally beating Julia. When she tried to escape, Filippo hit her again from behind, then stuffed her bleeding body into the trunk of his black Fiat Punto. When arriving at the scene of the attack, what they uncovered was alarming. On the ground was a large knife, its blade broken near the handle. Nearby were several dark reddish stains. Although the blood wasn't excessive, it indicated that someone had been injured. Forensic experts confirmed that the knife bore Filippo's fingerprints. The blood matched Julia's DNA. The broken blade and a deep gouge in the pavement. Investigators feared the worst but still hoped that Julia might be alive and urgently in need of help. Both students' phones had been turned off shortly after the incident. Data indicated that their last known location was that parking lot where the suspected assault and abduction occurred. Law enforcement opened a criminal case against Filippo, charging him with assault and unlawful detention based on the evidence collected. His parents were shocked and firmly believed that their son would never hurt Julia, claiming he loved her deeply. Detectives started tracking Filippo's movements by examining footage from roadside surveillance cameras. Later that night, a black Fiat Punto was spotted heading towards a lake in the Porton province. The next day, the vehicle was seen in multiple areas. On November 12, a young man who matched Filippo's description bought something at a gas station near the Austrian border. He used a €20 bill that had what looked like dried blood on it. The cashier didn't pay much attention to this detail at the time, but later surveillance footage confirmed that the buyer was indeed Filippo. A disturbing piece of evidence surfaced shortly after. Security video footage from a factory in the nearby town of Fosso shows Filippo brutally beating Giulia. After the assault, he stood over her lifeless body for several minutes before putting her in the trunk of a car. Investigators found pools of blood and clear signs of a struggle at the scene, leaving no doubt that Giulia had likely been killed. However, her remains were still missing, and the suspect's whereabouts were unknown. Filippo was officially declared wanted throughout Europe. Giulia's body was discovered near Lake Barsis in Piancavallo on November 18, 2023 by the Special Dogs Unit of the Civil Protection. The body was found inside a large nylon bag in a cave at 50 meters altitude, within a wooded area that is generally closed during the autumn-winter period for security reasons. The Italian Forensic Services performed an autopsy on December 1, 2023, and reported that Giulia's body had over 20 stab wounds. She had blunt force trauma to her head, and there were clear signs of her wrists being restrained. Additionally, adhesive residue on her face indicated that her mouth had been taped shut. The circumstances of this case suggested a personal motive and an unusual amount of anger. Filippo was found on November 19 in an emergency lane of a motorway near Leipzig, after his car had run out of petrol. Authorities arrested him and sent him back to Italy, where the case had caused a national uproar. During his initial questioning, Filippo confessed in detail about the events, but he stated that he was emotionally disoriented at the time and couldn't recall some parts of what happened. He recounted that they had spent a pleasant day shopping at the mall. On their way back, they stopped in a parking lot near Giulia's house. Filippo gave her a stuffed animal as a gift and asked if they could start their relationship over. Giulia reportedly raised her voice, rejected the gift, and got out of the car, which he claimed triggered a sudden outburst of anger. He grabbed a knife and chased after Giulia, injuring her shoulder in the process. She fell to the ground, and when he tried to strike her again, he missed, causing his knife to break when it hit the pavement. Filippo claimed he forced her back into the car, tied her wrists with rope, and covered her mouth with tape before driving around without a specific destination. Eventually, they ended up in an industrial area. According to him, Giulia managed to open the door and escape. He then took out a second knife and pursued her, continuing to attack until she stopped moving. When asked how many times he hit her, Filippo estimated maybe 5 or 7. However, the forensic team found over 20 wounds, and his story of an unplanned outburst was contradicted by the fact that he had arrived at the meeting with 2 knives, rope, tape, and plastic bags, indicating he was prepared. Filippo claimed he planned to take his own life afterward in order to be with Giulia. He even revealed shallow cuts on his wrists, although he confessed he didn't go through with it. He found it easier to end another's life than to end his own. Despite strong evidence implicating him, his family's legal team maintained that he was mentally confused and had memory loss. Their entire defense strategy focused on this idea, aiming for a lighter sentence or a transfer to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. Giulia's father, in his grief, took a remarkable action. He gave investigators pages from her personal diary and later made some of them public. His goal was to reveal the truth and draw attention to what his daughter had experienced. The diary entries clearly explained why Giulia had decided to end her relationship with Filippo and what was happening out of public view. Although she had loved him, Filippo had become controlling, emotionally manipulative. He monitored her whereabouts, kept track of her phone and social media, forbade her from seeing friends, and expected her to obey his demands at all times. A significant conflict occurred just before the tragedy involving Filippo's insistence on attending a small family birthday party for Giulia's sister, Elena. This event took place shortly after their mother had passed away, and Giulia's family was not in the mood to celebrate. Despite this, Filippo was angry, feeling that he was part of the family and had the right to attend all family gatherings. This disagreement made Julia reconsider their relationship, and she recognized that she needed to end things for good. However, Filippo began to use emotional manipulation, threatening to harm himself if she left him. Julia, being compassionate and empathetic, felt guilty about this. Unfortunately, her kindness would eventually lead to devastating consequences. On September 23, 2024, the summary trial of Filippo Turetta began at the Venice court. He is charged with intentional homicide, aggravated by malice, cruelty, brutality, stalking, and improper disposal of a corpse. By the start of the trial, new evidence indicated that the crime had been premeditated. Investigators discovered that Filippo had begun planning the attack about a week prior, conducting extensive online research for isolated locations in the suburbs that he could use to carry out the act and conceal the aftermath. His browsing history confirmed this. During a search of his car, officers found a printed map of the area. Initially, its relevance was unclear, but it later became evident that Filippo had chosen to use a physical map instead of GPS to avoid leaving a digital footprint. He meticulously planned every detail, but he seemed uncertain about what to do afterward. There were weak indications that he might have considered self-harm, but this was not convincing. By the time of his trial, it was clear that Filippo had acted with intent. He abandoned the emotional disorientation defense and made no claims of psychological instability, admitting that his actions were intentional. As expected, Turetta was questioned at the hearing on October 25, where he presented a 40-page memorial in which he detailed his actions. This prompted the court to cancel the hearing scheduled for October 28, as sufficient questioning had already taken place. At the hearing on November 25, 2024, the prosecutor requested a life sentence for Filippo Turetta. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on December 3, 2024, concluding the trial at the first instance. Aggravating circumstances of premeditated murder, kidnapping, and concealment of the body were acknowledged, while charges of stalking and cruelty were dismissed. In addition, Filippo must pay €760,000 in compensation to the Sacchetti family. In his final statement to the court, Filippo stated he would not appeal the verdict, acknowledging it as fair and expressing no intention to contest the outcome. Emily Beatriz Azevedo Senna was born in Várzea Grande, a city in the Brazil state of Mato Grosso. She lived with her mother and her stepfather, who became a father figure to her when she was 6. He worked as a radiology technician at Santa Helena Hospital in the nearby city of Cuiabá. The family lived a modest yet close-knit life. Emily was known for her kind nature, calm demeanor. Classmates and neighbors often described her as a gentle person who avoided conflict. At 16, Emily found out she was pregnant, a surprising discovery that she ultimately accepted. The father was a young partner of similar age. Instead of pulling away, he supported her throughout the situation. They started living together and he actively participated in getting ready for the baby's arrival. He went with Emily to doctor visits, assisted with planning, took part in conversations about names and baby items. Despite their youth, her partner demonstrated a strong sense of responsibility, dedication. Although their relationship encountered challenges because of their age, it was characterized as stable, supportive. For Emily, becoming pregnant was a major milestone in her life. She eagerly talked about her future daughter and shared her excitement with family, friends. Her mother and stepfather were very supportive, helping her choose furniture, buy clothes, prepare the nursery. Their home was filled with joy and anticipation. They celebrated the gender reveal twice, once with her partner's relatives and again with Emily's family. Friends remembered how glowing she looked when discussing her journey to motherhood. In another part of Mato Grosso, Natalie Helen Martins Pereira, a 25-year-old married to Christian Albino Cibalho de Arruda, 28, was raising their 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. Natalie worked in public safety, officially employed by the fire department while also taking nursing classes. To others, she seemed organized, responsible. However, beneath this surface, her life was more complicated. Several years ago, Natalie had a medical procedure that tied her fallopian tubes, which prevented her from becoming pregnant naturally. Despite this, she began claiming that she was expecting another child. To support her claims, Natalie created fake medical documents, including ultrasound images, and told others that she was having a baby girl. Christian believed her and shared the news on social media, posted the ultrasound images, even organized a gender reveal party. To make her story seem more convincing, Natalie often posted pictures of herself with what looked like a growing belly or loose clothing and explained her physical appearance as a sign of her impending delivery. In reality, this was all part of a carefully orchestrated and emotionally manipulative lie, a fake pregnancy that relied on fabricated evidence. Natalie not only staged a fake situation but also created an online identity. She joined various online groups for expecting mothers, where she pretended to be a helpful member who often offered items like baby clothes, diapers, and accessories to other moms-to-be. However, there was a catch: the items could only be picked up in person at her house, and the person collecting them had to come alone. This was a deliberate strategy where her online persona was used to make contacts and choose potential targets. No one in Natalie's close circle, neither Christian nor her family, realized that her cheerful demeanor was a meticulously crafted facade. She was intent on making her story a reality, regardless of the consequences. A few weeks before her disappearance, Emily started participating more often in online groups for expecting mothers. She shared her pregnancy thoughts, sought advice, and welcomed support. In one of these forums, she was approached by a user. Her messages were friendly. She offered to donate items for Emily's future daughter, such as clothes, baby blankets, and diapers. This seemed generous, and Emily was genuinely interested. Their conversation soon turned more personal. The user came across as warm and caring, emphasizing her desire to help. When Emily suggested bringing someone with her, like her partner or sister, Natalie became uneasy. She mentioned that her street had many nosy neighbors, and she wanted to avoid attracting any attention. Although her responses were unclear, they didn't raise any major red flags. Emily talked it over with her family and initially decided against going by herself. However, she changed her mind after Natalie offered to send a driver to pick her up, saying the car would be from a ride-sharing service like Uber. On March 12, 2024, around noon, a car came to pick up Emily. However, the driver, as later discovered by investigators, was not affiliated with any ride-sharing service. It was believed that he was either a relative or a friend of Natalie. The car was an ordinary civilian vehicle. Unaware of any potential danger, Emily got in after telling her mother that she would be back soon. She thought the outing would be just a quick trip to collect some donated items before returning home. After more than an hour without any updates from Emily, her mother, Anna Paula Meridian, started to feel anxious. Soon, messages began to come from Emily's phone. However, instead of soothing her worries, the texts only increased her anxiety. Emily claimed she was fine, enjoying a pastry, and would be back soon. Yet, something felt wrong. The language used was strange, overly formal, and didn't match Emily's usual way of writing. Anna quickly realized that someone else must have sent the messages. She attempted to call Emily, but there was no response, and her voice messages went unheard. As her concern grew, the family reached out to friends and acquaintances in hopes of finding Emily. Emily's stepfather was working at the hospital that day. He sensed something was wrong. He knew Emily had intended to pick up some items, and her failure to answer calls made him even more anxious. That evening, the family quickly decided to file a missing person report. At that time, no one knew where Emily was, who the driver was, or where she was headed. The only clue the family had was an online conversation with the woman, who mentioned living in the Jardim Florianopolis neighborhood in Cuiabá. This clue marked the beginning of a search by family members and friends. Worried and desperate, they knocked on doors in the neighborhood, checked the streets, and attempted to call the number mentioned in the messages, but no one answered. Communication had completely stopped. Emily's phone was still on, but she wasn't answering. Then, Natalie suddenly changed her online behavior. She stopped replying to chat group messages and withdrew her support for others. Later, it was revealed that shortly after Emily left home, Natalie deleted all her messages and her account. This disappearance from the online world only confirmed the family's deepest fears. This was not a chance occurrence. By the evening of March 12th, the search for Emily was in full swing. Her family had reached out to the local police, shared her photos on social media, and appealed to the public for assistance. The initial hours after her disappearance were filled with urgency and anxiety, but no one anticipated how drastically the situation would develop. The following morning, March 13, 2024, a woman arrived at the emergency room of Santa Helena Hospital in Cuiabá with a newborn. She was in a wheelchair and told the hospital staff that she had given birth at home the day before. She described the labor as quick and straightforward, so she hadn't felt the need for medical help at that time. Now, she said, she was just there for a post-delivery checkup. The woman introduced herself as Natalie. That morning, the hospital staff member on duty was Emily's stepfather, a radiology technician. Although he did not know Natalie personally, he immediately sensed that something was wrong when he saw her. The previous evening, Emily had gone missing, and one of the primary theories suggested it was linked to a conversation she had with an online stranger who was offering baby items. Emily had previously mentioned to both her mother and her stepfather that she met someone online. She even shared a photo of her from the messaging app. Emily's stepfather immediately recognized the woman in the photo as the same person Emily had been talking to before she disappeared. Natalie was holding a newborn baby that the doctors believed had just been born. However, something seemed unusual. Her behavior and physical state did not align with what one would expect from someone who had recently given birth. There were no visible signs of pain, post-labor symptoms, bleeding, or trauma. Medical staff also found that she was not producing milk when she tried to breastfeed. Even the way she stood and moved raised concerns. Even though she arrived in a wheelchair, she moved around confidently and chose to sit in a chair rather than needing to. A preliminary medical evaluation raised concerns. There were no signs that she had recently given birth. Her cervix was not dilated, and her uterus was of normal size, showing no changes or discharges that usually occur after delivery. This became crucial evidence that proved her story was false. The medical staff quickly informed hospital administrators and contacted local authorities about the situation. Emily's stepfather told investigators that Emily had gone missing the day before after planning to meet a woman. When he recognized the woman in front of him matched Emily's description and photo, his concerns grew. When officers arrived at the hospital, Natalie claimed that the newborn girl was her daughter, whom she had given birth to at home. She could not provide any documentation to support her claim, saying the birth was unexpected and there was no time to go to a medical facility. She answered questions calmly and showed no signs of distress. Investigators started looking into the origin of the newborn. They ordered emergency blood tests and DNA analysis. Medical professionals confirmed that the baby had been born within the last 24 hours, which matched the timeline of Emily's disappearance. This led to a troubling question: could this child be Emily's daughter? Investigators examined Natalie's phone and found deleted conversations, including exchanges with Emily. These messages showed that Emily had agreed to meet Natalie to receive baby items. This evidence indicated a clear pattern of deception. Natalie had created a false identity, gained trust, and arranged a meeting under false pretenses. At this point, the idea that Natalie had simply gone to the hospital for a checkup was no longer believable. Law enforcement began to suspect that Natalie may have brought a baby that she did not give birth to, but rather one that was taken from someone else. Their suspicions were confirmed when they analyzed ultrasound images that Natalie had shared on social media. Investigators discovered that these images did not belong to her. They were taken from another woman's profile, a woman living in a different state, who had no known connection to Natalie. As these discrepancies emerged, the police shifted their focus to finding Emily. The infant Natalie had brought to the hospital was placed in temporary protective custody under the care of social services until her biological identity could be verified. Shortly after, Natalie was taken to the police station for formal questioning. At first, she remained silent. When directly asked about the child's origin, she gave vague answers, claiming that everything had been explained and that nothing wrong had occurred. Although she appeared calm and showed no signs of panic, her reluctance to provide a clear explanation led investigators to suspect that she was stalling. Only after investigators showed her the medical exam results, which disproved her claim of giving birth, along with the recovered text messages linking her to Emily, did Natalie change her story. She then shared her initial account of events. She claimed to have met Emily in online parenting groups and said that Emily was struggling in her relationship. Emily had thought about not keeping the baby. Natalie asserted that she offered to take care of the child and that Emily had agreed. However, law enforcement had doubts about this explanation. Emily's family strongly denied any claims that she intended to give up her daughter. They insisted that Emily had been excited about her baby's arrival and never showed any doubts about keeping her. The whole family actively prepared for the new baby by buying clothes, setting up a nursery, and celebrating together. Emily's mother and stepfather emphasized that she viewed her future daughter as the most important part of her life, and the thought of giving the baby away was entirely unthinkable for her. This information was part of the official case file, and Natalie's statements were now being examined for inconsistencies. When faced with increasing evidence, Natalie eventually changed her story. In a second interview with investigators, she confessed that she had tricked Emily into coming to a house by pretending to offer baby items. Emily arrived alone, as they had agreed in their online communication. Emily then began to feel pain and sat down, complaining of cramps. At that moment, Natalie approached her from behind and forcefully restrained her. After Emily lost consciousness, Natalie bound her wrists and ankles with materials she had available. She then tried to deliver the baby by making an incision in Emily's abdomen with a sharp kitchen tool. Emily received no medical assistance and ultimately died due to severe blood loss. Natalie did not express any regret in her statement. She claimed that she wanted to take care of the baby and did not mean to cause any harm. However, the way she acted, using restraints and preparing certain materials, suggested that her actions were thought out beforehand. As Natalie continued to speak, her versions of events became more inconsistent with the facts. Investigators ultimately determined that the incident was pre-planned. After questioning Natalie, law enforcement started investigating all places associated with her. One property in the Jardim Florianopolis area received special attention. This private residence, owned by Natalie's brother, was said to be where she met Emily. During the property inspection, police noticed an area behind the house where the ground looked recently disturbed. The soil was uneven. They quickly cordoned off the area and called in forensic specialists. As the specialists carefully removed the top layer of soil, they discovered that a body had been buried. Emily's body was found in a shallow grave, covered loosely with dirt and debris. The way the body was positioned indicated it had been disposed of hurriedly. Her wrists and ankles showed signs of restraints, including ropes and bits of plastic cable. Investigators later determined that the bindings were made from old internet wiring. The grave itself was poorly dug, without the use of tools, and was barely big enough to hold the body. Emily's body displayed clear signs of trauma on her body. Her face had visible injuries, including bruises, swelling, and scratches. Forensic experts noted damage to her cheekbones and nose. There were also marks on her neck that suggested she had been choked, as well as bruises on her wrists indicating she had been forcefully held down. The autopsy revealed that these injuries occurred while she was alive, implying the use of significant force. It was determined that her death resulted from severe blood loss due to a deep wound in her abdomen. The precise T-shaped incision in her lower abdomen indicated that it was not an accident. Forensic experts indicated that the shape and depth of the cut suggested the perpetrator had a basic understanding of internal anatomy and made an effort to avoid injuring the baby. This degree of knowledge is rare for someone without medical training, although it could be obtained by watching detailed instructional videos. This was further confirmed by analyzing Natalie's internet search history. A key finding was that the burial site had been prepped in advance. Initially, Natalie claimed she dug the grave after the incident, but she later changed her story, admitting it was prepared the day before the meeting. A forensic team carefully examined the scene. Using chemical tests, they discovered important traces of biological material both inside the house and throughout the property. Blood stains were present in multiple rooms. Although some parts of the floor had been cleaned, residues were still left in the tile grout and seams. These findings were meticulously recorded and included in the criminal case. Given the amount of evidence, authorities officially reclassified the case as a premeditated crime with aggravating factors. Immediately after her arrest, Natalie stated that she acted alone and that her husband, relatives, anyone else were unaware of her plans. At that time, the house was occupied by her brother and his wife. Natalie stated that her brother and his wife were not home when the crime happened, but investigators could not confirm this. Their exact whereabouts during that time remained uncertain. A significant question was whether they could genuinely be unaware of a freshly dug pit on the property or that someone had come in to help clean the house. However, it was later established that Natalie had been to the house several times leading up to the incident, under the pretense of helping with chores or spending the weekend. This made her visits seem normal and unremarkable to those living there. Forensic experts noted that it would be very challenging for a single person to dig a pit, commit an act of violence, perform a makeshift procedure, move a body, clean the crime scene, hide evidence, and leave the area without drawing attention, all within a short period. This is especially true given the logistical difficulties involved. The body was wrapped in fabric and required various materials, while the cleaning process included removing items, wiped blood, and washing clothing. Each of these tasks demanded time, strength, and coordination. Did Natalie truly act alone? At the time of the investigation, there were increasing suspicions, but no solid evidence was found linking anyone else to the case. No family member had been officially identified as an accomplice. Cayo Police Chief Fernando Alvarez Albuquerque said authorities are continuing to investigate whether Natalie's husband, brother, and the driver had anything to do with the death and burial. After the body was officially identified and all forensic procedures were completed, Emily's family received permission for a burial. Because of the condition of the remains, the service was conducted quickly. The ceremony was brief and did not include a traditional farewell. It was held privately, attended only by immediate family members, Emily's mother, stepfather, the young father of the baby, and a few other relatives. The family was devastated by the loss. They were deeply affected emotionally and unable to speak publicly about their grief. Emily's mother, as reported by those close to her, was in a fragile emotional state and had withdrawn from social interactions, avoiding even her neighbors. Emily's partner, who never expected to become a father under such tragic circumstances. According to the family, he has remained dedicated. He frequently visits the baby. Despite his young age, he has shown a desire to be actively involved in raising his daughter. The newborn, who was rescued after the incident, has been placed temporarily in the care of her grandmother, Emily's mother, a decision made by child welfare authorities and the district attorney's office. Emily's stepfather is also considered one of the responsible guardians. During the first few weeks, medical professionals monitored the baby's condition closely. Fortunately, she stayed in stable health. After receiving medical clearance, the baby was taken home to the same place where her mother had lived. The reason for Natalie's actions remained a key topic of conversation. Even though she was already a mother of 3, she pretended to be pregnant for almost 9 months, creating an illusion of expecting another child. She went to great lengths to forge medical records and create a believable story online, portraying herself as an expectant parent on social media. However, her goal was not just to have another baby, she specifically sought out expecting mothers who were likely to have daughters. Her method of selecting targets, arranging the setting, and researching how to remove and take baby indicated that her actions were carefully planned. Natalie is still in custody, waiting for her trial. The charges against her are still active, and investigators believe the evidence supporting these charges is strong. Emily's case has gained significant attention and raised serious concerns, influencing how online interactions are perceived, particularly among vulnerable groups. This story unfolds in Canada and caught public attention due to its unusual developments. Nicole Porciello, also known as Nicole Hasselman, was a 34-year-old whose kindness and patience shone through her work in student support services at Templeton Secondary School in Vancouver. She was more than just a helper, she was a true mentor to students navigating the challenges of adolescence. At Templeton, Nicole specialized in supporting students with learning disabilities, crafting individualized plans that boosted their confidence and academic success. Her ability to listen without judgment made her a trusted figure, often staying late to help with homework or offer advice on personal struggles. The school was not just a workplace for Nicole, it felt like a second family, fostering genuine connections and support. Her colleagues viewed her as an inspiration, always approachable and willing to help, whether it was covering a shift or organizing school events. She was cherished not only for her professional skills but also for the warmth she brought to her interactions, often bringing homemade treats to staff meetings to brighten their day. Beyond Templeton, Nicole was deeply rooted in her East Vancouver community, volunteering at local food drives and coaching her son's soccer team on weekends. Her love for gardening transformed her small backyard into a vibrant oasis, where she taught her son about nurturing life and patience. She enjoyed quiet evenings reading novels or watching classic films, often sharing her insights with friends over coffee. These small moments defined her, a woman who found joy in connection and growth, always striving to make those around her feel valued. Outside of work, Nicole was a dedicated mother to her 10-year-old son, Ethan, whose sensitive and kind nature mirrored her own. Nicole successfully balanced her career with motherhood, pouring her heart and effort into both. She aimed to be a positive role model for Ethan, showing him the importance of kindness and how to make the world a better place. Their evenings were filled with rituals, cooking simple meals together, playing board games, or reading bedtime stories. She taught Ethan to stand up for others, drawing from her own experiences helping students navigate bullying. Her friends marveled at her ability to juggle demanding workdays with unwavering attention to Ethan's needs, from attending his hockey games to helping with school projects. Nicole's home was a sanctuary of love. On November 16, 2018, a tragic event changed the lives of Nicole's family and friends forever. Burnaby police reported a crash involving a 2017 charcoal gray Kia Sorento SUV at around 10 p.m. on Barnett Highway, a busy stretch illuminated by streetlights. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene. The car was severely damaged from hitting a lamppost, its front crumpled and windshield shattered. A man was trapped inside the vehicle, and time was critical, every second counted. Rescuers quickly cordoned off the area. They worked closely with police and medical teams, understanding that any delay could result in tragedy. A nearby driver, stopped at a traffic light, later told police he heard a deafening crash and saw the SUV swerve violently before impact, sparking immediate concern. Firefighters used hydraulic tools, known as the jaws of life, to pry open the mangled driver's side door, their movements precise under pressure. The man in the car remained seated as paramedics surrounded him, preparing to provide medical assistance as soon as rescuers freed him from the wreckage. After several intense minutes, the rescue commander signaled that it was safe to pull the victim out. The man was carefully removed from the damaged car and handed over to the medics, who noted his dazed expression and minor cuts. The emergency services worked efficiently, with each team member fulfilling a crucial role. Medics quickly began administering first aid, checking the man's condition thoroughly, pulse steady, breathing normal. Once they confirmed his condition was stable, they transferred him onto a stretcher and took him to the ambulance, where they started preparing for transport to Royal Columbian Hospital. The victim's name was Jan Popel, a 41-year-old real estate agent known in Vancouver's competitive housing market. At the hospital, doctors immediately conducted a complete examination and diagnostic tests, including CT scans, to identify any hidden injuries. They documented a few bruises on his arms and a mild concussion, but thankfully, no serious injuries were found. Jan's condition was stable, and his life was not in danger. Nurses monitored his vitals closely, noting his calm demeanor despite the crash's severity. After receiving the necessary medical care, he was kept under observation for 24 hours to ensure his full recovery. Police officers stationed nearby began questioning him as soon as he was cleared, sensing inconsistencies in his initial account of a mechanical failure causing the crash. Jan Popel had built a successful career selling properties in Vancouver's booming real estate scene, known for his charm and persistence in closing deals. Born in Burnaby, he grew up in a middle-class family and showed early ambition, earning a business degree before entering real estate. Colleagues described him as driven but private, often deflecting personal questions with humor. His professional life thrived, but his personal struggles simmered beneath the surface, particularly in his relationship with Nicole. They met in 2011 at a community fundraiser, where Jan's easygoing confidence caught Nicole's attention. Their early days were filled with shared dreams, weekend hikes in the North Shore Mountains, late-night talks about starting a family, and plans to buy a home together. Jan's attentiveness, like surprising Nicole with flowers after a long workday, made her feel cherished. However, his insecurities emerged within a year, triggered by Nicole's growing independence and social circle at Templeton. Jan's romantic relationship with Nicole started off very well, filled with romance, deep affection, and mutual understanding. They envisioned a future together, made plans, and exchanged thoughts. However, over time, Jan began to show traits that concerned Nicole. What began as a caring desire to protect her gradually morphed into obsessive behavior. He claimed to be shielding her from negative outside influences, which led him to isolate her from friends and family. By 2013, Jan's need for control intensified, particularly after Nicole received a promotion at Templeton, boosting her confidence. He began questioning her late work hours, accusing her of prioritizing students over him. His actions escalated to checking her cell phone and social media accounts, demanding passwords to prove her loyalty. His jealousy was extreme, and he struggled to hide his aggression, often raising his voice during arguments over trivial matters like a colleague's text. At a 2015 family gathering, he shoved Nicole during a heated dispute over her talking to a male friend, leaving her shaken but hesitant to leave him. Nicole's sister, Lisa, later recalled warning her about Jan's temper, but Nicole believed his apologies and promises to change. Nicole and Jan's relationship lasted 7 years, marked by growing pain and fear. Specific incidents painted a troubling picture. In 2016, Jan threw Nicole's phone against a wall after seeing a friendly message from a coworker, shattering the screen. In 2017, he followed her to a school event, confronting her in the parking lot and accusing her of infidelity, an outburst witnessed by a colleague. Despite this, Nicole clung to Jan's sweet promises that things would improve, often citing his tearful apologies and vows to seek counseling. He vowed to find the strength to become the loving and trustworthy partner he once was, but these promises prevented Nicole from ending the relationship, even though she felt deep down that Jan's behavior might never change. Friends urged her to leave, but Nicole's compassion and hope kept her tethered, fearing Jan's reaction to a final breakup. They had broken up multiple times, but Jan always pleaded for another chance, and Nicole would relent, believing Ethan deserved a stable family. Their most recent breakup, which she believed would be permanent, happened on November 7, 2018, after Nicole confided in a friend about connecting with another man, seeking a healthier future. Jan was unwilling to accept the breakup. He didn't want to lose Nicole. Overwhelmed by jealousy, he parked his car in front of her house and shared compromising photos of her on social media, a humiliating act that left Nicole devastated. After Jan was removed from the car, the police started their investigation, led by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, a specialized unit for complex cases in British Columbia. They interviewed eyewitnesses, including a jogger who saw the SUV speeding erratically before the crash, and examined the accident scene in detail, collecting debris and tire marks to reconstruct the sequence of events. Their questions were designed to uncover the real causes of the crash, suspecting it was no accident. Meanwhile, firefighters finished their tasks and began to pack up their equipment before returning to the station. However, one officer, sweeping the perimeter with a flashlight, made a startling discovery. About 30 feet away from the car, in a muddy ditch obscured by bushes, lay a woman who was unconscious but still breathing. It was Nicole. Her clothes were torn, and blood soaked her jacket, alarming rescuers who immediately called for a second ambulance. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, noting weak vitals and severe trauma. She was rushed to Royal Columbian Hospital, where the medical team performed emergency surgery to address massive internal bleeding. At the hospital, Nicole's condition was critical from the moment she arrived. Doctors identified multiple stab wounds, some penetrating vital organs, and worked tirelessly to save her. Her family, notified by police, gathered in the waiting room, clinging to hope as updates grew bleaker. Carmine, her brother, paced anxiously, while her father, Joe, sat in stunned silence, grappling with the suddenness of the crisis. The medical team's efforts, including blood transfusions and surgical interventions, were ultimately unable to save her life, and Nicole was pronounced dead at 3:17 a.m. on November 17, 2018. Her death sent shockwaves through the hospital staff, many of whom knew her from community events, and left her family in a state of profound disbelief. A few days later, police released a statement. Nicole died from injuries sustained in an SUV crash in Burnaby last week, but authorities discovered evidence suggesting foul play. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team took charge, coordinating with forensic experts to analyze the scene. An autopsy was performed on Nicole's body at a forensic laboratory shortly after her death. An experienced medical examiner, familiar with such cases, carefully examined and documented the numerous injuries on her body. He found a total of 47 stab wounds, some deep and inflicted with significant force, penetrating her chest and abdomen, while others appeared more superficial, suggesting she had struggled to defend herself. The examination revealed that the wounds were made by two different knives, one a serrated kitchen knife, the other a smaller paring knife, indicating a prolonged and frenzied attack. Blood spatter analysis suggested the stabbing occurred inside the vehicle before the crash. The examiner understood that his findings would be crucial in helping law enforcement identify the perpetrator and bring them to justice, providing a clear link to Jan Popel's presence in the SUV. After the autopsy, forensic teams worked tirelessly, analyzing fingerprints, DNA, and the knives recovered from the vehicle. The official report compiled all expert findings, including toxicology results showing no substances in Nicole's system, ruling out intoxication as a factor. This report was not just a document, it became a crucial element in the murder investigation, providing investigators with essential information to move forward. It hit detectives cross-referenced phone records, revealing Jan's threatening texts to Nicole days before the murder, and secured surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showing the SUV's erratic path. Interviews with Nicole's friends confirmed Jan's abusive history, including a coworker who witnessed his 2017 outburst, bolstering the case. In the wake of Nicole's death, her family, friends, and colleagues were overwhelmed with deep sorrow that hit them unexpectedly and intensely. It was incredibly difficult for her family to accept that they would never again hug their beloved mother, daughter, and sister, hear her voice, or create new memories together. Joe Porciello, Nicole's father, withdrew into grief, haunted by memories of her infectious smile. Lisa, her sister, struggled to explain the loss to Ethan, who asked daily when his mother would return. Nicole's friends, who had shared her most heartfelt dreams and experiences, felt they had lost a true companion. They remembered how hard she had worked to rebuild her life, start anew, and pursue her happiness, particularly after years of enduring Jan's control. At Templeton, teachers and students created a memorial garden in Nicole's honor, planting her favorite sunflowers as a tribute to her nurturing spirit. The school's principal issued a statement praising Nicole's dedication, noting how she transformed lives with her empathy. The holidays were particularly difficult for Nicole's family. Her brother, Carmine Porciello, felt he would never fully accept that his little sister was gone. During family dinners, "It's impossible not to notice her empty seat," he said, indicating where she would have sat, her absence a palpable void. Ethan, now living with his grandparents, withdrew from hockey, struggling to process his mother's absence. Community members rallied around the family, organizing vigils and fundraisers to support Ethan's future, a testament to Nicole's widespread influence. On November 29, 2018, Jan Popel was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nicole Porciello's death. A hit confirmed the incident was isolated, involving known parties, posing no threat to public safety. Detectives worked hard to gather and secure all evidence, including Jan's blood-stained jacket and the video he recorded, which became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Reconstructing the timeline of events was vital to the investigation. A HIT's analysis of surveillance footage, phone records, and text messages clarified Nicole's whereabouts and Jan's actions. A chilling text from Jan on November 15 read, "You'll regret leaving me," contradicting his claim of an amicable split. This organization of details revealed inconsistencies in Jan's statements, such as his assertion that the crash was accidental, and allowed investigators to assess his premeditated intent. As previously noted, Nicole and Jan's relationship spanned several years, marked by a pattern of breakups and reconciliations. 9 days before her death, Nicole told Jan their relationship was over, confiding in a friend about her hope for a new start with another man, which amplified Jan's jealousy immensely. On the evening of November 16th, Jan picked up Nicole in a rental car while Ethan was at hockey practice. They got into an argument, during which Jan pulled out 2 kitchen knives and stabbed Nicole repeatedly in the passenger seat. Instead of calling for help, Jan took off his bloody jacket, used his phone to record a video, and tried to capture the moment in a misguided attempt to document her suffering. In the video, Nicole could be heard gasping, "He loves she," but Jan showed no remorse, saying, "She brought this on herself." He claimed he stabbed her because he couldn't accept her moving on. After the attack, Jan drove home, leaving Nicole bleeding in the car while he went inside to send emails, including one resigning from his job. For 2 hours, as Nicole clung to life, Jan paid bills and shopped online for a TV and dishwasher, actions later described by prosecutors as callously indifferent. When he returned to the rental car, finding Nicole still alive, he allegedly decided to stage a crash to mask the murder. When Jan accelerated rapidly and crashed into a streetlight, Nicole, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle, landing in the ditch where she was found. The deliberate high-speed impact, confirmed by skid marks, supported a HIT's theory of premeditation. As a result of the gathered evidence, Jan faced charges of second-degree murder. The legal process began with a preliminary hearing in 2019, but Jan's guilty plea on December 15, 2020, expedited proceedings, avoiding a full trial. Sentencing hearings, held in March and April 2021, were a difficult time for Nicole's family and friends, who filled the Vancouver courtroom seeking closure. During the sentencing, a video recorded by Jan after stabbing Nicole was shown to the court. The judge, Justice Kathleen Kerr, cautioned that it contained graphic content and urged anyone who might feel uncomfortable to exit. The 1-minute video depicted Nicole, severely injured and struggling to breathe, while Jan accused her of disrespecting him. "You just took from me and disrespected me for months and years," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. Nicole's father, Joe, visibly upset, left the courtroom, unable to bear the footage. As the video played, Jan sat with his head down in the prisoner's dock. Carmine yelled, "Look at the video. Raise your head," prompting Justice Kerr to call a 15-minute break to ease tensions. After the video, 4 victim impact statements were shared. Joe described Nicole as a beautiful soul and the foundation of their family, saying, "He has destroyed our family. We cannot forgive him for what he has done." Carmine expressed that the crime left him feeling like a zombie, filled with anger and rage. Ethan, through a written statement read by a counselor, shared that his mother was his best friend and that he felt a part of his heart was lost. Nicole's friend, Sarah, spoke of her infectious positivity, urging the court to honor her memory with justice. Justice Kerr characterized Jan's actions as heartless, cruel, and self-centered, but noted his guilty plea as a sign of limited remorse. Joe disagreed, telling reporters Jan seemed unfazed, like he was on a lunch break. Jan Popel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. The Crown sought 15 years before parole eligibility, citing the crime's brutality and Jan's abusive history, while his attorney argued for 10 years, emphasizing his plea. Neither option comforted Nicole's family, particularly her cousin, Gina Iuliano, who believed first-degree murder charges, with a minimum 25 years, were warranted given the premeditation. In the week before sentencing, Nicole's friends and family launched a social media campaign, Justice for Nicole, to highlight her death's impact and demand stricter domestic violence laws. Posts shared her story, photos from school events, and calls for systemic change, gaining thousands of supporters. In a statement to the court, Jan expressed regret, claiming he never meant for this to happen. On April 13, 2021, Justice Kerr sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years, balancing the crime's severity with his plea. Nicole's family felt the sentence was too lenient, telling reporters outside the courthouse that Canada's justice system failed victims of domestic violence. Gina vowed to advocate for tougher laws, joining local groups to raise awareness. Nicole Porciello's vibrant life, marked by her unwavering kindness and dedication as a mother and mentor, was brutally ended on November 16, 2018, by Jan Popel's jealousy-fueled violence. While Popel's life sentence with 15 years until parole brought some justice, Nicole's family deems it insufficient, their pain deepened by her absence at family dinners. Her legacy endures through the love she instilled in her son and the students she guided at Templeton Secondary School, where her warmth remains a guiding light. The family's social media campaign and outspoken grief have sparked calls for stronger protections against domestic violence, ensuring Nicole's memory fuels a fight for justice. Though her loss leaves an unfillable void, Nicole's spirit inspires a commitment to a safer, kinder world. In 2020, the story of a young British woman named Angel Lynn shocked the entire United Kingdom. She had been stuck in a harmful relationship with a man involved in crime who faced serious legal issues. Whenever Angel tried to leave, the situation worsened. During her last attempt to escape, it turned into a kidnapping and a life-threatening incident. Thankfully, Angel survived, but her life now is very different. Angel Lynn was born in a suburb of Loughborough, Leicestershire in England Midlands. She was the youngest daughter in a family of 6 children. Her parents, Patrick, often called Paddy by friends, and Nikki, were ordinary people. Patrick operated a small retail business, while Nikki dedicated herself to managing the household and caring for their children. Although the Lynn family was not wealthy, their business provided a steady income to meet their basic needs. They lived in a spacious and comfortable home, working hard to ensure their children received a good education. Angel had a strong, loving bond with her family, especially with her mother, Nikki. She confided in her mom about everything, her future plans, dreams, and concerns. From a young age, Angel was very energetic. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and had many friends. Others viewed her as ambitious, principled, someone who stood up for what was right. She aspired to attend college to study law and work in the justice system. Angel was well known for her stunning looks and slender. With her bright blonde hair, deep blue eyes, she always drew attention and brightened up any event. Many people admired her, but she seldom went on dates due to her busy schedule. Angel cherished her independence and was committed to being self-sufficient. While still in high school, she worked part-time as a waitress at a local fast food restaurant. She diligently saved money for college and bought her own clothes, makeup, and personal items. After finishing high school, Angel successfully entered her dream college. She chose to become a crime scene investigator and enrolled in a program to help her reach that goal. She juggled her studies, work, and sports with impressive energy. Everything was going smoothly until she met a young man named Che Boskill, who took everything away from her. Che Boskill was the younger son of his mother. He grew up with his older half-brother. His mother single-handedly raised the boys, as neither of their father was involved in their lives. She worked multiple jobs from early morning to late at night to support them, which meant that money was always tight. Because she was rarely home, she spent little time with the boys, leaving them to take care of themselves in less than ideal living conditions. Che exhibited aggressive behavior from a young age, causing concern among those around him. He frequently had outbursts of anger, got into fights, and faced continuous trouble. As a teenager, he encountered legal issues and was arrested multiple times. Despite this, his mother always intervened to defend him, viewing her younger son as nearly perfect despite his actions. His older brother also faced legal troubles, but Che ultimately became a more serious offender while still in school. Nevertheless, their mother did not see any issue with their behavior and did not view them as a bad person. At only 15 years old, Che got involved in crime. He began by stealing cars and taking them apart for parts. Soon after, he joined a local gang where he quickly built a reputation, found his role. It's important to mention that Che was following his brother's path. However, his brother was less aggressive and better at managing his anger. Che loved motorcycles and cars, but instead of just driving, he sped down the streets at high speeds. He obtained his driver's license and, for some time, drove cars for his friends in the gang. By the age of 18, he had purchased his own car with money earned from illegal activities. He frequently drove while under the influence of alcohol and banned substance. On one occasion, he caused a serious accident by crashing into a utility pole, which resulted in him being hospitalized. Although he lost his driver's license, he continued to drive stolen cars and even live-streamed his dangerous driving around town. As Che became more entrenched in organized crime, he escalated from minor crimes like petty theft and carjackings to more severe offenses, including robbery and banned substance dealing. He and his associates began to steal luxury cars on demand and targeted affluent individuals. Che took pride in being a bad guy. Despite being arrested multiple times, he consistently managed to evade significant penalties, often receiving only light sentences. Che had a captivating appearance and a charming personality, despite his reckless behavior and self-destructive lifestyle. Even as a teenager, he easily attracted the attention of girls. When his illegal activities started making money, he spent it lavishly to impress those he liked. However, his bad temper and aggressive nature prevented him from maintaining any meaningful relationships. Che was a manipulative bully who wasn't afraid to resort to violence. While he could initially charm a girl, most would leave once they recognized his true nature. Unfortunately, not everyone was fortunate enough to get away. In early 2019, Angel met a man while spending time with mutual friends. They were both the same age and attended the same university, quickly discovering that they had much in common. Their immediate chemistry led to a budding friendship that soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. Within a few weeks, they introduced each other to their families, indicating that they were serious about their commitment. Hattie and Nikki were pleased with their daughter's choice, as her boyfriend came from a good family and was a decent person. Similarly, his parents welcomed Angel warmly. They spent a lot of time at each other's homes. Their friends and family often joked about a possible wedding in the future. Just 6 months into their intense relationship, they unexpectedly broke up for unclear reasons. Her boyfriend initiated the breakup, leaving Angel feeling heartbroken. Shortly after, he began dating someone new, prompting Angel to distance herself from mutual friends to avoid seeing them together. She found herself isolated, without her boyfriend or friends. Though her family supported her, she fell deeper into sadness. Even focusing on her studies and work didn't provide much relief. During a challenging period in her life, Angel met someone who would become very important to her. By chance, she crossed paths with Che. He was immediately taken with her beauty. He approached her, asked why she seemed sad, suggested they take a walk and get coffee. Angel needed someone to confide in, and Che proved to be a surprisingly good listener. They exchanged phone numbers, quickly began talking and meeting regularly. Che made an effort to impress her with his kindness and support. Before long, Angel realized she was developing feelings for him. At that moment, she truly believed she had found someone deserving of her time, effort. Che tried to impress Angel by showering her with expensive gifts. He taking her to trendy clubs, restaurants, and concerts. She wanted to learn more about his job, but he was very good at concealing his illegal activities. One evening, Angel invited him to dinner at her parents' house. What was supposed to be a warm family meal turned into a heated argument due to Che's arrogant behavior, which upset Angel's parents. Afterward, Nikki, Angel's mother, expressed her concerns about Che and urged Angel to end the relationship. To avoid upsetting her parents, Angel told them that she and Che were just friends, promised to spend less time with him. However, Angel and Che continued their secret relationship, never thinking about breaking up. Che made reservations at fancy hotels for their romantic evenings together. Angel felt she was with a good man, she had fallen in love with him. Che was still in frequent contact with his girlfriend. They called each other many times a day and sent constant texts. He often inquired about her whereabouts, activities, companions. Trusting him, Angel shared everything, believing this was his way of showing he cared. Unfortunately, this was actually the start of his controlling and manipulative behavior. In just a few months, Che learned everything about Angel, her whereabouts, her friends, her work and school schedules. He earned her trust and started to distance her from friends he didn't like. He pressured Angel to lie to her parents, creating a rift between her and her family. By August 2019, his control grew stronger. He dictated her clothing choices, restricted her conversations, even banned her from wearing makeup. Che regularly checked her phone, deleting contacts he disapproved of. He constantly monitored her, questioning her about unplanned outings and showing up if she was out longer than usual. The situation escalated to the point where Angel couldn't greet a male acquaintance without provoking a fierce argument. Her parents started to notice significant changes in her behavior. Once lively, cheerful, Angel became pale and withdrawn. She stopped wearing makeup, started dressing in baggy clothes, and seemed constantly anxious. She became secretive, always clutching her phone and hurrying away to be alone whenever it rang. Her conversations with her mother and sisters dwindled, leading them to become suspicious. When anyone asked how she was doing, she insisted everything was fine, but her reassurances sounded less convincing each time. As a result, the distance grew between Angel and her family. Che took control of her life, turning her from a vibrant young woman into someone isolated and invisible, who believed her only worth was to him. Che began to control every part of Angel's life, even trying to persuade her to quit school and work, promising to handle everything for her. Despite this, Angel was determined to pursue her dreams. Che's control grew stronger. He accessed her social media accounts, installed a tracking app on her phone. He monitored her every move and conversation. He could appear anywhere at any time, which made Angel feel constantly anxious, on edge. Under his pressure, Angel got a tattoo of his name on her arm, as if he had branded her as his own. Che treated her like property. He would call her multiple times a day, even at night, insisting that she turn on her camera so he could see where she was and who was with her. Angel reached her breaking point, tried to end the relationship several times, but Che refused to let her go. What started as a romantic relationship turned into pure manipulation. Che effectively stalked her, controlling her every action, all under the guise of love and concern. In January 2020, Che and several friends were arrested for trying to steal a car, received 4-month prison sentences. For Angel, this seemed like an opportunity to break free from a toxic relationship that was going nowhere. However, she was wrong. Every day, Che was allowed to make a phone call, and he used it each evening to contact Angel. His friends watched her and reported back to him. Angel felt constantly monitored and powerless to escape her fear. At the end of May, Che was released from prison. He immediately went to Angel's house and caused a scene. When Angel tried to break up with him again, he demanded that she pay him back about £80, which he claimed to have spent on her before he was imprisoned. Angel quickly gave him all the money she had saved, but the harassment worsened. A week later, Che physically attacked Angel for the first time. Just a week after that, he assaulted her again, and a bystander, concerned for Angel's safety, called the police. However, Angel chose not to press charges, so Che faced no repercussions. On July 9, 2020, a neighbor of Che's called the police because he heard a woman screaming for help. At that time, Che had pinned Angel to the ground and hit her head against the floor. Although Angel needed medical help afterward, she did not report the incident. In the following months, she continued to experience psychological and physical abuse from Che. Fearful of what Che might do to her or her family, she remained silent about the situation and tried to endure it, even though she realized it couldn't last forever. In September of that year, Angel made the difficult decision to end her relationship for good. Che reacted strongly, physically attacking her, leaving her with scrapes and significant bruises on her face. After the incident, he appeared to calm down, even apologized, vowing to be more respectful in the future. However, Angel believed he wouldn't genuinely change and pushed to end the relationship entirely. She felt certain that the toughest and most dangerous challenges were still ahead, but she was prepared to face them. Che, after making several attempts to win Angel back, proposed that they should at least stay friends. Angel agreed, thinking that if he believed they were still on good terms, he might lose interest in her, stop pursuing her. On September 17, 2020, Angel went to work, later committed to picking up Che and his friend Rocco Sansom in their van. They frequently relied on her as their driver, especially when they were too drunk or under the influence of substances to drive themselves. That day was no exception. Angel arrived at the designated parking lot, where the van was parked. Che and Rocco were waiting. Once everyone was inside the van, they drove off. Angel and Che had a heated argument while driving. She pulled over, stopped the vehicle, and jumped out, running away quickly. This incident was recorded by street surveillance cameras. In the footage, Che can be seen angrily chasing after her. He catches her and forces her back into the van before taking the driver's seat himself. The vehicle then sped away, completely disregarding traffic laws. This situation amounted to a kidnapping, as Angel was trapped inside the van with two men. She was clearly terrified. It's unclear what she experienced during that time. In the next 15 minutes, the police received numerous reports about a suspicious van speeding away from town, with the driver behaving erratically. However, officers couldn't respond in time before a tragic event occurred. Suddenly, the passenger door of the van flew open, and Angel fell out at high speed, narrowly avoiding being struck by two cars following closely behind. Fortunately, the drivers reacted quickly and stopped their vehicles. They rushed to her aid. Someone called the police. Meanwhile, the van continued for about 100 kilometers per hour as if nothing had happened, then slowed down and returned to the scene. To any onlookers, it might have appeared that the driver had simply dropped something small and returned to retrieve it. Che approached the gathering calmly, told those present that the injured young woman was his girlfriend, that they had just argued. He said he wanted to break up with her and that she had lost control, attempting to jump out of the moving van. However, his account seemed unconvincing. He stayed on the scene, waited for the medics and police to arrive, repeating his story verbatim. It was evident that he believed Angel wouldn't survive. He seemed to be shifting all the blame onto her. His friend Rocco, who was also in the van, supported his version of events, mirroring his words. Despite her severe injuries, Angel was still breathing when she was rushed to the nearest hospital by ambulance. Unfortunately, the chances of saving her were low. She had broken ribs, broken limbs, a compression fracture in her spine, and many cuts, bruises. The most critical injury was a traumatic brain injury that led to significant bleeding in her brain. For several days, doctors fought tirelessly to save her life. She underwent multiple complex surgeries, including one to remove part of her skull to relieve pressure on her brain. Her heart stopped several times, and she was clinically dead on those occasions, but the medical team was able to revive her each time. Eventually, Angel was placed in a medically induced coma and put on life support. Her chances of waking up were nearly non-existent. The doctors were astonished that she had survived the initial accident, but their outlook was bleak. They warned the Lin family that, even if she miraculously survived and could breathe independently, she would likely remain bedridden and in a permanent vegetative state. They suggested considering the option of disconnecting her from the costly life support machines, but her parents refused to even think about it. Che and Rocco were held at the scene and taken to the police station for questioning. They both insisted they had done nothing wrong, claiming that Angel was out of control and that the incident stemmed from her attempts to take her own life. However, security camera footage showed a different reality. Che was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, causing serious physical harm. Rocco was arrested as an accomplice. Both remained in jail while waiting for their court appearances. The trial started in January 2022, with new charges of assault and harassment added. The defendants did not admit guilt. The prosecutors failed to provide clear evidence that Angel was intentionally thrown from the moving van. As a result, the jury could not come to a unanimous verdict, leading to the defendants receiving relatively light sentences. Rocco was sentenced to just 21 months in prison for his involvement, while Che received a 7-year sentence. The Attorney General referred Che Bauskil's sentence to the Court of Appeal under the lenient sentences scheme. In March 2022, the court increased his sentence to 12 years. However, Che will still be eligible for parole after serving 8 years. Despite the doctor's discouraging predictions, Angel continued to fight for her life. Although she suffered significant brain damage, she eventually began to breathe on her own. After a few months, the doctors lifted her from the medically induced coma. Initially, she did not recognize anyone, could not control her movements, and needed to be fed through a tube. There were no indications that she was aware of her surroundings. Meanwhile, Angel's cousin, Farron Davis, has set up a GoFundMe page to help her recover from the horrific incident. Kind strangers and members of her community have donated nearly £200,000, which will be used to renovate the family home, as they have received no assistance from the council. Angel is now doing well and will soon be able to move out of the flat and live with her family once the construction work is complete. Her sister, Rhiannon, is planning to move nearby from Newcastle so she can join her mother in looking after her. In the spring of 2022, her parents brought her home to care for her themselves. A year later, in May 2023, Angel amazed everyone by starting to respond to her environment. Just a month after that, she looked at her mom, Nikki, and called out, "Mom." Now, Angel Lynn is going through a lengthy rehabilitation process, has even begun to take her first steps. Although the doctors are skeptical about her returning to her previous life, her parents refuse to accept that possibility because their daughter has shown time and again that she is a fighter. On December 8, 2019, a man emerged from Koyan Junction railway station, carrying a large, heavy black bag. Koyan Junction is a major railway station on the central line of the Mumbai Suburban Railway Network, located at the junction of the northeastern and southeastern lines of the Mumbai Suburban Division of the Central Railway, 54 kilometers northeast of Mumbai. At 5:15 a.m., dawn was just breaking and the sun had not yet risen. Despite the early hour, Koyan Junction is always busy because it operates 24 hours a day with trains arriving and departing constantly. As a result, many auto rickshaws are typically waiting outside the station, especially during nighttime. In India, auto rickshaws are motorized versions of traditional manually pulled or cycle rickshaws. They are usually owned and operated by private individuals. A man with a heavy black bag approached an auto rickshaw driver outside the station and asked for a ride to Bhiwandi. The distance from Koyan Junction to Bhiwandi was only 3 miles and would take approximately 15 minutes. However, the rickshaw driver immediately noticed a terrible smell coming from the man's bag. The man said he had some rotten vegetables in his bag that he planned to throw into the river on the way. The smell was so strong that the rickshaw driver refused to take him to Bhiwandi. The man walked over to another nearby auto rickshaw driver to see if he would take him as a passenger. He left his heavy bag next to the fist rickshaw driver because it was too difficult to carry. While waiting, rickshaw driver started to wonder why the man had put rotten vegetables in a brand new bag. If the vegetables were spoiled, wouldn't he usually just use a plastic bag? The rickshaw driver noticed that the bag emitted a smell similar to that of a butcher shop where meat is prepared. The man convinced an auto rickshaw driver to take him, but the driver only agreed to the ride for 180 Indian rupees, which is about $2, because of the foul odor coming from the bag. Normally, the fare from Koyan railway station to Bhiwandi is just 80 rupees, or about $1. The first driver nearby overheard this and was surprised that he would pay more than double the usual fare. This made the driver suspicious, so he asked the man to open the bag. Upon hearing the rickshaw driver's words, the man became nervous and didn't respond. Instead, he instructed the second auto rickshaw driver to start driving. However, the second driver also found him suspicious and refused to take him. A tense situation developed outside the railway station. The first driver then called the police. When the man saw this, he panicked, left his bag behind, and bolted toward Kulyan railway station, disappearing from sight. Meanwhile, other auto rickshaw drivers outside the station called the police to report the abandoned bag and the foul odor coming from it. After the call, police quickly arrived at the railway station. The auto rickshaw driver reported that a man had approached him with a smelly bag, but when he had asked him to open it, he had run away. Alarmed, the police instructed everyone to back off. They then opened the black bag in front of the crowd. As soon as the bag was unzipped, everyone present, both auto rickshaw drivers and police officers, was struck with fear. It was likely the first time any of them had seen such a terrifying sight. Even some of the officers were witnessing something this gruesome for the first time in their careers. Inside the bag were the severed lower half of a human body, specifically, human legs. From the start, the police identified the dismembered body as belonging to a woman based on its physical characteristics. They promptly sent the body part to a nearby hospital for an autopsy and DNA testing. However, since the body was missing its head, it was very challenging to establish what the deceased woman might have looked like or what her facial features were. The pathologists quickly informed the police that the woman's body had been dismembered with a weapon that had sharp, serrated edges. They noted scratches on her thighs and observed that the area where her torso had been separated was cut in a rough, uneven way. This led them to believe that a handsaw was likely used in the dismemberment. The police discovered from the pathologist examining the body that the girl had been murdered 2 to 3 days prior. They estimated her age to be between 20 and 25 years. At the same time, the police struggled to identify the unclaimed body. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the crime branch, also known as the Crime Investigation Department, joined the investigation. Afterward, the Kulyan police stepped up their investigation and decided to interview the auto rickshaw drivers who had first noticed the bag and alerted them. When the police spoke with first driver and his fellow drivers, they learned that the person who placed the black bag near the railway station was wearing a red shirt and khaki pants, and had a white cloth wrapped around his head. Since this unidentified individual had left Kulyan railway station, the police and the crime branch team quickly requested CCTV footage from all cameras at the station. The police then organized a large team to analyze all the camera footage, focusing on the time frame from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. on December 8th. After several hours of searching, some officers finally spotted the man in the red shirt on one of the station's cameras. To their surprise, he wasn't alone. Another man in a pink shirt was also seen holding the bag as they both exited the station together. However, the first driver and the other auto rickshaw drivers reported that only one person had approached them. When the officers shared the CCTV footage with the drivers, they recognized the man in the video as the one who had delivered the black bag to them. They also informed the police that when they called the police emergency number in front of that man, he became frightened and ran back inside the railway station. This led the police to review more CCTV footage. In another CCTV footage, a man wearing a red shirt was spotted running on a platform. He entered a restroom, took off his red shirt, and put on a different shirt. This change was probably made to avoid being recognized, although he kept his khaki-colored pants on. When he left the restroom, he walked casually, trying to appear nonchalant. By this point, he had likely boarded a train and escaped, which posed a new challenge for the police. They needed to identify this man and find out where he had come from. The officers speculated that he was likely local to Kulyan City, as it would be unusual for someone to carry a heavy bag containing human legs over a distance of 100 to 150 miles just to dispose of it. After the suspect left Kulyan railway station at around 5 a.m., the police collaborated with railway officials to determine how many trains had stopped there around that time and their origins. They discovered that 3 trains had arrived at the station within a 20-minute window, 10 minutes before and 10 minutes after 5 a.m. The police then traced these trains back to their previous stops. At that point, only half of the girl's body had been found. The police believed that if the murderer had placed her legs in a black bag, he might have dismembered the rest of her body and disposed of it in another black bag elsewhere. Consequently, they issued a public alert asking people to report any abandoned bags immediately. They also contacted their informants to check if any girls aged 20 to 25 had recently been reported missing in the nearby areas. The police continued their search for the man seen in CCTV footage from 3 different railway stations. Their efforts paid off when they spotted a man in a red shirt at Titvala railway station around 4 a.m., waiting for a train. He was carrying the same large, heavy black bag. He had received help from a man in a pink shirt at Kulyan railway station. The 2 stations are about 9 miles apart, so it was clear that he couldn't have walked the entire distance with such a heavy bag. He must have used some form of public transportation. The police decided to question the auto rickshaw drivers waiting outside the station. They used screenshots from the CCTV footage to show each driver and asked if any of them had dropped a man off at the railway station with a large bag. While the man's face was unclear in the images, his clothing was distinctive. One of the auto rickshaw drivers outside Titvala railway station recognized the photo and approached the police, stating that he was the one who dropped the person off at the station in the early hours of December 8th. When the police inquired where he had picked up the man, the driver explained that there was a place in Titvala called Indira Nagar, where the man had been standing on one of the roads. He said that when the man saw his auto rickshaw, he had flagged him down and asked for a ride to the railway station. He mentioned that the man had a very large bag that he couldn't lift by himself, so he helped him load it into his rickshaw. After that, he stated that he had dropped the man off at Titvala railway station as he had requested. Upon receiving this information, the police quickly went to the spot where the driver had picked up the man. On their way to Indira Nagar, they got an important call from an informant. The informant shared that the man who left the black bag at Kulyan railway station, the same person they had been tracking through CCTV footage, actually lived in a chawl in Indira Nagar. This news surprised the officers because the chawl was very close to where they were. Without delay, the police team changed direction and headed toward the chawl. During the investigation, they learned that in India, a chawl is a form of low-cost housing commonly located in densely populated areas with limited living space. The police found a girl around 13 or 14 years old who was in the 6th grade. They showed her a photo of a man in a red shirt and asked her if she recognized him, suggesting that he might live around there. Although the man's face was not very clear in the photo, the girl identified him by his clothing and hairstyle, stating that the uncle looked like Arvind uncle. The police then asked her where Arvind uncle lived. After obtaining his flat number, they went to his apartment but found the door locked from the outside. The officers felt disappointed, as they had not yet located the man despite their efforts. Rather than give up, they decided to interview Arvind's neighbors. During these conversations, the police also showed some of the neighbors the CCTV footage from the railway station. From this, they learned that the man's full name was Arvind Tiwari and that he worked as a manager at a transportation company called Pawan Hans Logistics. However, after speaking with the neighbors a little longer, the police discovered that Arvind Tiwari had a daughter who lived with him, but she hadn't been seen in the past 2 to 3 days. This raised concerns for the police. Not only was Arvind missing with his house locked, but his daughter had also not been seen for days. As the pieces of the puzzle started coming together, their suspicions about Arvind deepened, and they grew increasingly worried about his daughter. Because of this, the police went to the transportation company where Arvind worked to look for him. They found Arvind Tiwari there at the time. The first question the officers asked him upon seeing him was, "Where is his daughter?" The moment he heard this, a trace of tension appeared on his face, and the police immediately sensed that Arvind was hiding many secrets. Sensing this, the officers took Arvind to the police station for questioning, away from the rest of the company's employees. Even there, the police repeated their question about his daughter. However, at first, he continued lying, saying his daughter has gone to the village to meet her mom and sisters. After hearing this, the police realized that Arvind himself would not tell the truth. Because of this, they showed him the CCTV footage in which he was captured. When the police asked him about the black bag, he broke down and then confessed his crime, admitting that he himself killed his daughter. The legs recovered from the bag belonged to his 22-year-old daughter, Princy Tiwari. After this, Arvind voluntarily recounted the entire story behind why he killed his daughter. Arvind Tiwari, 47 years old, was originally from Jaunpur, Uttar Pradesh, a city about 915 km away from Kalyan. Besides him, his wife and 4 daughters also lived in Jaunpur, with Princy being the eldest among them. In early 2016, Arvind moved from Jaunpur to Malad in search of work. During this time, in June 2019, his eldest daughter Princy completed her graduation and moved in with her father to pursue a better future. Princy decided that she wanted to get a job to financially support her father and the rest of the family. Within a few days of arriving, she began looking for a job at a local company. Soon, she found success and secured a small position at a private firm not far from home. However, about 2 to 3 months later, in October or November 2019, Princy informed her father that she was in love with a boy and wanted to marry him. However, Arvind Tiwari was an old-fashioned man, one could call him a conservative father. When he found out that the boy his daughter wanted to marry was from a different caste, he outright refused the marriage. On the other hand, Princy was adamant that she would only marry him. Arvind was unwilling to accept this marriage because he believed that if he married his daughter into another caste, people in society would say a lot of things against him. Besides, he still had to arrange the marriages of his 3 other daughters, and if Princy married outside their caste, it would create difficulties for 3 other daughters' marriages as well. With Princy insisting on marrying the same guy and her father Arvind equally adamant about stopping the marriage, arguments between father and daughter began to occur from time to time. On the evening of December 6, 2019, after both Arvind and Princy returned home from their respective work, another argument broke out. However, this time the argument escalated to the point where, in anger, Princy consumed rat poison, causing her to lose consciousness. At this point, it is unclear whether Princy consumed the rat poison herself or if Arvind, exerting control over her, deliberately made her drink it. In fact, the police believe that Arvind had mixed the poison into his daughter's food, and as soon as Princy ate it, she lost consciousness. Arvind Tiwari insisted to the police that Princy had taken the poison by herself. However, this raised an important question: if Arvind was honest, why didn't he take her to a hospital or doctor right away? The facts show that Princy was left unconscious in their home throughout the night, and instead of seeking help, Arvind chose to go to sleep. When he woke up on the morning of December 7th, he found that Princy had stopped breathing and had died from the poisoning. Seeing this, Arvind became extremely anxious and decided to dismantle his daughter's body to hide it in faraway places or rivers. He thought that if he did this, the police would never find Princy's body, and he wouldn't be caught. That morning, Arvind went to the market and bought 2 large bags and a handsaw. He returned home and, in his small room, cut his daughter's body into 3 parts. He removed her head from her torso and then separated the torso from the legs. He placed the legs in one bag, the torso along with both hands in another bag. This horrifying task took him all day. When night arrived, he took the bag containing his daughter's torso out of his room. He used public transportation and convinced an auto rickshaw driver to take him to his desired location by claiming he was carrying rotten vegetables. On the way, he discarded the bag into a river in Titvala. The next morning, December 8th, Arvind left again, this time with a bag containing the lower half of his daughter's body. He first arrived at Titvala railway station and then took a train to Kalyan railway station. After getting off the train with the heavy bag, a passerby noticed Arvind struggling and offered to help. The man, wearing a pink shirt, assisted Arvind in lifting the bag and carried it outside the railway station before departing. Later, police confirmed that the passerby seen in the CCTV footage was not the murderer. He had simply helped Arvind with his luggage. The police tracked him down to his home, where he reiterated that he had no knowledge of the contents of the bag and only provided assistance. Following this, the police took Arvind with them as they searched for Princey's upper body and head. Arvind admitted that he had thrown the bag containing Princey's torso into the Ulhas River, leading the police to follow the river in hopes of finding it. On December 11th, they located the bag in the Ulhas River. Subsequently, the police turned their attention to finding Princey's head. Arvind guided them to the place where he had disposed of it. Despite searching for several days, they could not find the head. However, they did recover the handsaw used in the murder from the area Arvind had pointed out. While her head remained missing, forensic scientists were able to verify through DNA testing that the body was indeed that of Princey Tiwari. A father had brutally killed his own daughter simply because she had fallen in love with a boy from another caste and wanted to marry him. Now, Arvind Tiwari is in police custody. By committing this murder, he has not only ruined his own life but also the lives of his 4 daughters and his wife. In the end, this man will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The murder of Princey Tiwari by her father, Arvind Tiwari, in Tidwala, India, revealed the devastating toll of caste-based prejudices. Arvind's refusal to accept Princey's inter-caste marriage led to her poisoning and the gruesome disposal of her remains in the Ulhas River. Arrested and charged under Section 302 of the Indian Penal Code, Arvind faces life imprisonment, likely with additional penalties for tampering with evidence. While justice awaits final sentencing, the tragedy has shattered Princey's family and sparked calls for reform, urging India to confront rigid traditions that fuel such irreversible losses. Mike Rayeshel married his first wife, Didi Hoffman, in 1979 while they were students at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Mike seemed to have it all. From an early age, Mike showed outstanding qualities. He was a dedicated Boy Scout, nearing the rank of Eagle Scout, and an altar boy, reflecting strong moral values. At the University of Florida, he joined a fraternity, developing athletic skills and excelling in academics. He later earned a Master of Business Administration from the University of Miami, paving the way for professional success. Didi, his wife, noted that Mike was a supportive husband who never physically abused her. However, their relationship had reached a breaking point. They had 2 daughters, Caroline and Kate, whom Mike loved deeply. Despite his accomplishments, he spent long hours traveling for work, causing his daughters to become accustomed to his absence during their early years. After 25 years of marriage, Didi informed Mike that she wanted a divorce. She then moved out of their home to provide their daughters, Caroline and Kate, a familiar place to return to during their college breaks. At 49, Mike found himself single for the first time in many years and wanted to find love again. In the mid-2000s, as internet dating became popular, he created a profile on Match and soon connected with Susan O'Brien Rayeshel, a 38-year-old Hispanic nurse. As their relationship developed, Mike and Susan enjoyed great dates and trips together. Shortly after they met, Susan moved into Mike's home, taking over the space that had been Didi's. When Caroline first met Susan, she was worried about her father's new girlfriend. Caroline was surprised by how much Susan drank at their first meeting. Despite having several martinis, Susan was able to walk and talk normally. This behavior was unusual for Caroline, raising concerns in her mind. In 2007, despite Caroline's concerns, Mike and Susan got married. This marked a significant change in their lives, as Susan stopped working and Mike stopped traveling for his job. Instead, he bought a local business called Ocala Dental Care, which became central to their daily lives. To outsiders, Mike and Susan seemed like the perfect couple. They lived in an affluent neighborhood in Alachua County, Florida, known as Hiley Plantation, and often joked about their seemingly ideal life together. However, underneath this facade, they were facing serious challenges in their marriage. In the summer of 2007, Mike proposed a prenuptial agreement to Susan, which surprised their friends and family. They had always been seen as a strong and united couple. What led Mike to suggest a prenup? The turning point was an incident at one of his daughter's parties. Susan, who had a fiery personality, used foul language in front of Mike's daughter, leading to an intense argument. This incident prompted Mike to think about protecting his assets in case their marriage ended in divorce. Mike and Susan seemed financially secure, but there were hidden problems. Susan revealed to Mike that she had $35,000 in credit card debt, which worried him greatly. One significant issue in their relationship was Susan's negative feelings toward Mike's daughters. Caroline mentioned that the only time she could talk to her father was when he was alone in his car. Susan's dislike for his daughters created a barrier, preventing Caroline from having meaningful discussions with her father. Even though Mike and Susan encountered challenges, their relationship appeared to improve, at least outwardly. In 2016, when Caroline announced her engagement, Susan became very involved and wanted to play a major role in planning the wedding. She insisted on hosting a bridal shower for Caroline, even though this is usually a responsibility of the bride's mother or sister. While organizing the shower, Susan intentionally left out Caroline's mother's friends from the guest list but made sure to invite her own family and friends. Although it was somewhat unusual for Susan to be so heavily involved, Caroline ultimately found the shower enjoyable, appreciating the effort Susan put in to make it fun and memorable. When Caroline was choosing her wedding dress, Susan went with her to the bridal boutique. They looked at various dresses together until Caroline found one she loved. Susan even used her credit card to pay for the $1,000 gown. In November 2017, Caroline married at Oheka Castle in Long Island, with 160 guests in attendance. The wedding was opulent and had the grandeur fit for royalty. Before Mike walked his daughter Caroline down the aisle, she noticed a strange mark on his face. When Caroline asked him about it, Mike dismissed her concerns, wanting to avoid upsetting her on such an important day. 3 weeks after the wedding, Mike revealed to Caroline that the mark had become a long white scar, which was the result of physical abuse by his wife, Susan. He shared that Susan had been arrested for domestic battery after she became violent while drunk. Susan, on the other hand, described the incident differently. She claimed that after Caroline's wedding, Mike told her that the event had gone $150,000 over budget, which made her very angry. This led to a heated argument between them. During the confrontation, Susan threw her phone at Mike and pushed him in an attempt to calm things down. Ironically, it was Susan who called 911 to report the situation. She said she intended to leave for their beach condo to help defuse things, but she took too long to depart. Consequently, when she hadn't left the house, the police arrested her. The court later mandated that Susan stay away from Mike, and she sought help for alcoholism, counseling, and anger management. After some time, Mike chose not to file charges against Susan, leading to the case being dropped. Susan moved out of their home and into a condo in Ponte Vedra. While this gave her a break from the couple's ongoing conflicts, it was temporary. On February 3, 2018, at 3:30 a.m., Mike Reischel made a disturbing call to 911 from his home in Gainesville, Florida. He told the dispatcher that someone had entered his house and that his wife, Susan, was bleeding heavily. When the police arrived, they found Susan seriously injured on the bed in the master bedroom. Medics were called immediately, and they rushed her to the nearest hospital. As she was taken into surgery, doctors worked hard to save her life. She was in critical condition, and her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Mike's home, which had been secured as a crime scene. He began investigating, carefully looking for any clues. What he discovered was alarming. In the master bedroom, there was a large amount of blood on the bed and a bloody bent knife, but no signs of forced entry through doors or windows. To understand what happened, the detective reviewed security camera footage from Mike's house. However, after examining the footage, he found no one leaving the house. Susan miraculously survived the attack but suffered serious injuries to her wrist, stomach, and neck. Once she regained consciousness in the hospital, she shared a startling account with the detectives investigating the case. Susan revealed that there had been no intruder. Instead, it was Mike who had attacked her. She claimed Mike had fabricated a story about someone breaking into their home and assaulting them. Susan explained that they had begun arguing during dinner at a local restaurant and decided to return home in separate cars. When she arrived home, she went straight to bed. As she was falling asleep, she suddenly felt a sharp stabbing pain. When she opened her eyes, she found Mike standing over her, holding a knife. Overcome with panic, she shouted, "Michael, you are going to kill me." To her horror, Mike responded, "That's exactly what I want to do." Susan's cries for help went ignored as Mike continued to stab her, leaving her in extreme pain and covered in blood. For an hour, she lay in bed, bleeding heavily and terrified for her life. Mike told her that he wouldn't kill her if she agreed to claim that an intruder had broken into their home and attacked her. Desperate to survive, Susan reluctantly went along with his story. He then changed his clothes and called 911, pretending that a robbery had happened. Mike Reischel was arrested for the attempted murder of his wife, Susan. The news shocked many, including his ex-wife, Dee Dee, and his daughters. Dee Dee, who had divorced Mike years ago, found it hard to believe the allegations. She had never seen any signs of violence during their marriage and couldn't wrap her head around the accusation against her former husband. Similarly, Caroline and Kate were stunned by their father's arrest. They had always viewed Mike as a kind and generous man. The idea that he could hurt their stepmother was unimaginable. As events progressed, Mike faced more charges alongside the attempted murder charge. He was indicted for false imprisonment, obstruction, and tampering with evidence. These new charges made the situation more complex and serious. Because of Mike's wealth, the judge set a bond of $2.5 million for these additional charges, but no bond was allowed for the attempted murder charge due to its severe nature. Mike's arrest shocked the community. Many who knew him and his family struggled to reconcile their views of him with the serious charges he was facing. In June 2018, while awaiting trial in jail for the attempted murder of Susan O'Brien Reischel, Michael Reischel was accused of hiring a hitman to kill his wife. According to sources, Reischel contacted Roderick Jermaine McCullum, a 33-year-old inmate, to plot Susan's murder for $100,000, providing details about Susan's home and a floor plan. McCullum was also charged with conspiracy, but the case was sealed due to the ongoing investigation. Eventually, the charges were dismissed, and Mike's daughter Caroline called the idea so absurd it was laughable. It is important to note that in November 2017, Susan was arrested for domestic violence after throwing a phone and punching Mike in the arm during an argument over Caroline's wedding expenses. Mike reported to the police that Susan had a drinking problem and had repeatedly abused him, which led to a restraining order. Susan denies the charges of violence, and the case was dropped when Mike chose not to pursue Susan's prosecution. The 2019 trial shed light on the troubled relationship between Mike and Susan. During the proceedings, Mike described their marriage as strained and tumultuous. He explained that they rarely had visitors at their home, mainly because Susan was opposed to Mike inviting his friends from his former university's advisory board. Another source of conflict was Mike's involvement in charitable activities. He stated that while he enjoyed making donations, this sometimes led to disagreements with Susan. Mike mentioned that she would frequently threaten to divorce him if he attended committee meetings, country club events, or made donations without her approval. Mike expressed that he struggled with conflicts regarding charitable contributions, while Susan's spending habits appeared to go unchecked. He stated that Susan frequently bought clothing and jewelry without discussing it with him. This difference in how they managed their finances contributed to the stress in their marriage, leaving Mike feeling frustrated and overwhelmed by their ongoing financial difficulties. Additionally, he testified that Susan sometimes resorted to violence to resolve disputes. For instance, in July 2016, he claimed that Susan threw a wine bottle at him from the top of the stairs, hitting his shoulders. This was not an isolated incident. He mentioned other times when she threw vases and heavy mugs at him. He did take pictures of his injuries and shared them with his daughter, Caroline. Mike consistently insisted during the trial that, despite experiencing abuse, he loved his wife and wished to stay married to her. However, he felt he had to tread carefully around her, always worried about her reactions. On February 3, 2018, Mike invited Susan to dinner, hoping they could improve their relationship. He chose their favorite steakhouse, believing a change of environment and a romantic setting might help. Unfortunately, during dinner, Mike received a text from his daughter, Caroline, which upset Susan. The atmosphere turned awkward and tense, and Susan's anger grew, prompting her to leave the restaurant in an Uber. After the meal, Mike followed her in his car. On their way home, Susan texted Mike, implying she thought Caroline would sabotage any future relationship he had. When Susan and Mike returned home that night, they communicated through text messages rather than speaking. Susan let Mike know that she was going to file for divorce and would be leaving the next morning. At around 10:13 p.m., she sent him one last message about his serious as Susan's with boundaries regarding his daughter. While Susan was alone in the guest room, Mike unexpectedly entered and attacked her. She felt pressure in her upper abdomen and noticed a knife in his hand. Susan claimed that Mike insisted they were not getting a divorce and described a violent struggle during which he sliced her left thumb. She stated that he stabbed her multiple times and slashed at her wrists, leaving her with serious injuries. She testified about losing a significant amount of blood, which caused her to vomit and lose control of her muscles and bodily functions. Mike reportedly told her that he would stay with her until she died. However, Mike provided a different account of the events. He said that he entered the bedroom and saw Susan on the bed with a knife. A fight broke out over the knife, which resulted in Susan being fatally stabbed in the stomach as they fell onto the bed. Mike, however, did not clarify how Susan also sustained stab wounds to her neck and thumb during the incident. In his testimony, Mike said he meant to call 911 for help after accidentally injuring Susan in the struggle. However, Susan reportedly asked him not to make the call because she was afraid of being arrested again for domestic violence. According to Mike, they lay together as she bled for several hours. The prosecution argues that if Mike's account is accurate, he and Susan were in a blood-soaked bedroom filled with vomit and human waste. Mike reported that at 3 a.m., their dog entered the messy bedroom, which led him to get out of bed to attend to the dog. During this time, Susan took a knife and harmed her wrists, allegedly saying she was afraid of going to jail. Mike asserted that he reassured Susan he wouldn't get her arrested and instead chose to lie to the police, claiming he would protect her. They then agreed on a fake robbery to call the emergency services. As part of his plan, Mike disabled the security cameras to make it look like a break-in occurred at around 2:42 a.m. At 3:30 a.m. on February 3rd, he called 911 and turned the cameras back on. The prosecution argued that Mike's actions showed he intended to harm Susan. They claimed that his willingness to lie about what happened and manipulate the surveillance footage indicated he was trying to hide his involvement in the crime. In contrast, the defense argued that Mike acted out of a desire to protect his wife. They asserted that Susan's attempted suicide stemmed from her mental health as Susan's and that Mike was trying to save her when he turned off the camera and lied to the police. A bloodstain pattern analyst testified in Mike's defense, stating that he reviewed medical records supporting Mike's account. The analyst explained that if Susan had cut her wrist around 10 p.m., as she said, she would have died from blood loss. However, if Mike's version of events was accurate, it was more plausible that she survived the incident since medical help arrived shortly afterward. The prosecution dismissed Mike's claims about wanting to reconcile with his wife. They presented evidence showing that Mike had visited 3 dating websites, suggesting he was not serious about mending their relationship. In response, Mike's defense pointed out that he had also looked at websites aimed at helping battered husbands. After a 9-day trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict for Mike Reischel on attempted first-degree murder and other charges. In December 2019, he was sentenced, but Susan chose not to attend the hearing. Mike's daughter, Caroline, spoke in court, expressing her pride in being his daughter. She shared how compassionate and selfless Mike had been throughout the years, always prioritizing others. Several of Mike's friends also spoke up, describing him as kind, gentle, and a true gentleman. Although the prosecution sought a 50-year sentence, the judge decided to impose a 30-year sentence on Mike. Considering Mike's age at the time of sentencing, it's probable that he will spend the rest of his life in prison.